Good evening, everybody. The time is now 7 p.m. and the executive session has been concluded. The participants in the executive session were
Carol Harvey,
Val Carr,
Ken Matthews,
Paul Saunier,
Noel Sawyer,
John Schaefer,
Aaron Smith,
David Buttery.
Suzanne LeClaire.
Thank you. If any person who participated in the executive session believes that any substantial discussion of any matters not included in the motion to go into the executive session occurred during the executive session in violation of the open meetings law, I ask that you state your concerns now. Hearing none, the next agenda item will be the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll all stand and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you, everybody. We're on agenda item 3A. And I'll just start by saying this. I think it's really important because sometimes we don't publicize our great kids in our community and some of their accomplishments. So I'm always thrilled when we can do that. Today I'm going to read a proclamation recognizing the Woodland Park High School Best Robotics Team for their accomplishments in the sport of robotics. Whereas, Boosting Engineering Sciences and Technology Best Robotics is a middle and high school robotics competition whose mission is to engage and excite students about engineering, science, and technology, as well as to inspire them to pursue careers in these fields. Whereas this project-based STEM program, over 850 middle and high school teams with more than 18,000 students learn to analyze and solve problems utilizing the engineering design process, which helps them develop technological literacy skills. Robotics is recognized by many schools, districts, and state interscholastic sport, covering bodies as a sport on a par with football, basketball, baseball, track, tennis, etc. It is the sport in which most of the student participation will turn pro than in any other scholarship sport. The best game for 2017 was Crossfire, which challenged the students to demonstrate the use of robotics in firefighting by rescuing a simulated victim, removing drums of hazardous material from the fire area, and extinguishing the fire itself. They were given an Apollo 13-like situation in which teams were provided with a limited set of resources. They had to develop a scoring strategy, design and build their robot in 6 weeks. Whereas Woodland Park High School has the honor of hosting the inaugural Pikes Peak Best Robotics Hub competition on October 25th, 2017. Whereas the Woodland Park Best Robotics team had the distinction of placing second in the robot game competition and winning the Most Robust Machine Award. Now, therefore, the council members of the City of Woodland Park hereby proudly recognizes the Woodland Park High School Best Robotics Team, their students, mentors, and coaches for their accomplishment in the sport of robotics, and look forward to their continuing success in future Best Robotics competitions. In witness thereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Woodland Park to be affixed this 17th day of November 2017. Signed, Neil Levy. Congratulations. I'm going to read some names, and I have some mayor's pins to give out. I can just tell by the look in the room and the smiles on people's faces what a thrill this is, and how honored and privileged we are to have these kids in our community. And I say it all the time, we're doing great things at the schools, and I don't know that we're always promoting and recognizing that. So this today will go a long way, and those that are in the audience, you'll recognize this, but spread the word. These are some of the greatest people in our community. I always say when I work with young kids, who most of you know that's really my passion, our country's in a great place because our future is really bright. So I want to call everybody up at once, and then we'll name some names if that makes sense. Gentlemen and coaches, if you'll come forward, that would be great. Thank you very much. So we'll start with the coaches, and I'm not sure who they are, but Armando Quintana and Gary Adamson were the leaders, and the participants, I don't know all these kids either, so maybe step forward so everybody knows. Jesse Anthony Bennett. Not here today? Okay. Zach Gallion. Alex Niley. Thad Saylor. I know Bobby Costello is not here. Cam Vella. Nick Rollins. Philip Walenta. Nate Estep, and David Pedroza. We're going to give mayor's pins, but one of the leaders from the community really is Lou Ramon, and we don't have a whole lot of rocket scientists in our community, but we got two here today, which is unusual. But Lou, where are you? Lou, here you go. Lou Ramon's a leader, a big pusher of this particular event, and we really couldn't do it without Lou. So thanks for your passion, Lou. And everybody, a big round of applause. For all the women
Well, they gotta work on that next year. This is only their first year, so we got a couple of challenges.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
One more time. Thanks very much.
Mr. Mayor, if I could comment, I represented on your behalf and the city council the opening ceremonies for the competition, and one of the things that struck me about this particular group of young men was their ability to take a task and complete it within a 6-week period and learn conflict resolution, teamwork, risk management, and time management. And my first thought was, I hope one of you is going to run for city council soon. Thank you. It was great, and thank you for including me in the competition.
Thanks. And I should say too, Carol, thank you very much for filling in for me. You always do a great job. And thank you all once again. Great job. Okay, we'll move on to appointments to Keep Woodland Park Beautiful and the Woodland Park Personnel Board. I think we're going to take these one at a time, and Laura Pellegrino.
Thank you, Mayor Levy. It's my honor to introduce Kelly Horde. Thank you, Kelly, for standing up. To be appointed for the Keep Woodland Park Beautiful Committee. She is here tonight, and if the council has any questions, she is available to answer them. This is the last position of a 15-member board. With Kelly's appointment, we will be full for the first time that I can remember, and I'm not sure the last time we had 15 members on Keep Woodland Park Beautiful. It is a working committee. A lot of the members actually get out there and get their hands dirty. So we are very pleased that Kelly has submitted her application, and I will defer to the board.
Well, thank you. Council, would you like to hear from Mrs. Horde? She's the only one, and we can approve her unless you'd like to hear from her.
Since this is our last hurrah, I really think we should hear from her.
Let's do it then. Ms. Horde, would you like to come forward? And when you get to the podium, if you'll just give us your name and address, and I guess just tell us why you want to do what you want to do.
Great. Kelly Horde. I live in Florissant. If you've been to Guffey, you've been past my house. So I just want to be part of the community, and it's a great community, and I want to be a part of something that's good and growing and help with that development. My desire really is for all the adopt-a-spot areas to be adopted. That's kind of a thing that I have as a personal goal. So like that's my plan anyway.
Well, that's great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Kenny, I'll defer to you.
Well, we've got a great board, and I'm pleased to be on it. But it's great that it's full, and we have people like you to be involved. We can't ask for more. And volunteers are what it's all about in this community. So
Great.
thank you.
Love to. Great.
Any other comments, questions?
No, thank you for wanting to be on.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Paul, you want to make a motion?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sure.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Great. Suzanne?
Carr,
Yes.
Harvey,
Yes.
Levy,
Yes?
Matthews,
Yes.
Soinier,
Yes.
Sawyer,
Yes.
Schaefer.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Council, if you could remember to please pull the microphones close to you to speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, may I administer the oath of office?
Do them separately?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let's do that.
Sure.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Kelly Ward, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and of the state of Colorado, the charter and ordinances of the city of Woodland Park, and that I will faithfully perform the duties of Keep Woodland Park Beautiful, upon which I'm about to enter. Congratulations. And then Laura has presents for you.
Is this the only board position that gets presents?
No planning commission
No
gets.
planning?
And then this one you can keep for your records. Thank you.
Invitation binder for you. Here's your own very personal best. And
Thank you, Kelly. Okay, Laura, we have one applicant for the Woodland Park Personnel Board.
That really should be me.
I'm
Mayor.
sorry.
Thank you. As you said, we have one applicant for the Personnel Board. Last time we met a couple of weeks ago, October 5th, you appointed 2 individuals to the Personnel Board, so there's still one opening. You have the information in front of you, the application, and Mr. Michael Stinner is here with us this evening, available for questions to be interviewed. And then after appointing Mr. Stinner, if the council so chooses, we need to decide the terms for the 3 positions. It's a 1-year term, 2-year term, and 3-year terms.
Great. Thank you, Suzanne. Michael, why don't you come forward, sir? Give us your name and address, and we'll go from there.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council, staff. My name is Mike Stinner. I live at 1140 Michael Lane.
I'm going to just start by saying this. I've got to meet the Stinners the last year or so, or a little bit more. And it wasn't always because they were happy with what the city was doing or not. But we've always had great discussions. I love your approach. Smart guy. I think you'll be a great addition. So thanks very much for stepping up. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Neil.
Bet.
Is there any questions I can answer?
John?
Yeah. Why do you want to join the board?
Well, in the past, different towns where I've lived, I've been active in the fire department, scouting, different professional organizations. I've always tried to contribute to the community. My current job, unfortunately, I travel quite a bit, 2-3 days a week. This is a position that I heard about at a recent council meeting, and I think it's a place where I can help.
Anybody else, Val?
Thank you, sir. I always concentrate on the HR parts of qualifications. You listed responsible for hiring and termination. Can you give us a little synopsis of that, please?
Sure. In different positions I've held, I've been an operations manager, senior project manager. Most of these are all construction related. So I've had to make decisions, sometimes hard decisions, regarding personnel, both in the field and in offices. I've had a staff as many as 60 people working under me. And there's good times and there's less than good times.
Anybody else? Okay, if not, just need a motion to approve Michael Stinner.
So moved.
Second. And a second. Thank you, Suzanne.
Harvey,
Yes.
Levy,
Yes?
Matthews,
Yes.
Sonier,
Yes.
Sawyer,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yes.
Carr.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Suzanne.
So now the task in front of the council is, as I mentioned earlier, there's a 1-year term, 2-year term, and 3-year term that needs to be appointed. So we have Sherry Carr, Jason DeVoe, and Mr. Michael Stinner now.
So correct me if I'm wrong, we'll have one assigned to each of the three. One will be a 1 year, one will be a 2, one will be a 3.
That's correct, sir.
How do you recommend that we should go about
Want
this?
to pull them out of a hat or something?
That doesn't work.
Has anybody,
We've done that before.
has anybody
In
stated,
favor of that.
Yeah.
has anybody stated that they can't be 3 years or 2 years? Have made any input?
No. A recommendation that I know we have done in the past is you've sometimes taken the order that we've received the applications in has been one way the council has done it. I can add that as a suggestion.
In what order? Reverse 3, 2, 1, or 1, 2, 3?
It's, yes. And I have the order of the applications as well here for you.
Which is?
Sherry Carr, Jason DeVoe, and Michael Stinner,
So it'll be 3, 2, 1 in that order?
if you decide.
And one question, is there an established set of bylaws for this board since it's never existed before?
No.
So this particular group would be responsible for writing their own bylaws?
They don't really have, they don't operate with bylaws. What they operate are with procedural rules and regulations, which would be fashioned by the city attorney and provided for them if they ever needed to meet.
So just for clarification, what is the procedure of them meeting? Who's in the room with them at that time? How
They
does that
meet in
work?
executive session.
Okay, so they do meet in executive session.
That's correct.
Who's in the room with them?
I'll let the city attorney answer that question.
We have yet to ever have this hearing happen. And since the charter was written, there have been a number of cases that deal with things like and these sorts of quasi-judicial boards that meet in executive session on these sorts of issues. So we would be referring to the applicable case law, and we would provide that as a guidance to this board if and when they would need to meet.
Do they elect their own chairman?
They may, that may be something that they would do. The main thing that council should be aware of is that there would be a recommendation that they have separate counsel. So council would be hiring legal counsel to advise them.
And Mayor Levy, may I just clarify one thing?
Please.
It is that you're appointing the 1, 2, 3-year terms, and then after that, when they get reappointed, they always will be 3-year terms.
Oh, that
Is
makes
the way
more sense.
is the way it's set up. It's staggered.
Now I understand. Sounds good. Well, council, if you have no other questions, I'll call for a motion to approve Michael Skinner.
So moved.
I'm sorry.
We did that.
I'm sorry.
To the form, the way we want to do the
3,
terms.
2, and 1. Go ahead and give us that order again.
Okay, so we would have Sherry Carr for 3 years, Jason DeVoe for 2 years, and Michael Stinner for 1 year appointments.
Sounds good.
So
Have a
moved.
Second. Thank you.
Okay.
Suzanne?
Levy,
Yes.
Matthews,
Yes.
Sonier,
Yes.
Sawyer,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yes.
Carr,
Yes.
Harvey.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Mr. Stinner, may I have you come up to the podium? It's the audience. You raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Michael Skinner, do solemnly swear
solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the state of Colorado,
and the state of Colorado,
the charter and ordinances
the charter and ordinances
of the city of Woodland Park,
of the city of Woodland Park,
that I will faithfully perform the duties
and I will faithfully perform the duties
of the Woodland Park Personnel Board
of the Woodland Park Personnel Board
upon which I am about to enter.
on which I am about to enter.
Congratulations, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Suzanne. We'll move on the agenda. Additions, deletions, or corrections, and we have one from our city attorney.
Yes, Mayor, the 6:45 PM executive session was only pursuant to 2 purposes. Those are labeled number 2 and number 3. And so what should be removed from the agenda is everything beginning in the first line with the paren 1, close paren, and ending in the second line with the word interest. That should be removed from the agenda.
Thank you. Any other deletions, corrections, additions? Yeah. We're going to go back up to our report from the Woodland Park Main Street Board, and Bob Carlson, if you'd like to come forward.
Thank you. Bob Carlson, 1155 Windflower Lane, Woodland Park, Colorado. And we have some hands up. These are copies of all the slides, so if you want to take notes, you can. And some slides, oops. Okay, get down there. Click. That's pretty fast. Okay, and then full screen.
Help them out.
Down at the bottom. Okay, sorry about that. Thank you, Kit. I got different software.
Okay.
Not quite. Okay, thank you for this opportunity to present the accomplishments in Main Street program. I don't expect there will be a vote this evening, but hopefully what I have to say will influence some with regard to the budget for the Main Street program. I'd like to start by expanding our vision about what it is that Main Street is supposed to accomplish, because when I was told we want to know what our return investment is, what is return? A few years ago when I was taking my daughter to visit all the colleges down the East Coast, we would drive back by a college, and if it looked like the grass wasn't cut and the buildings weren't in nice shape, we just pass it by, okay? So it's a vital part of a community to have their downtown look like people are there, shopping, it's attractive, pedestrian safe, and that is basically what it is the Main Street is trying to accomplish. At the national level, there's a Main Street USA. It's been in existence for 35 years, okay? And this is what their program is to intended. And you can read it. I don't like to read slides. But what we're trying to do is bolster our local economy, preserve our history, and build community. And building community is really, in essence, an essential part of this, which I'll cover a little bit later. Quickly, mission. It's all the right words as far as historic preservation, revitalization. We have economic development in there, but we're not from the sense that we're trying to attract businesses. What we're trying to do is provide a community that looks attractive, so businesses would want to, they think it's a prosperous community and would want to relocate here. But we're not in the business of trying to bring in companies and that sort of thing. For us, it's about having a vital Main Street. So, just going back over this again, there are 2,000 Main Street communities nationwide. I don't know how many cities there are, but this a small fraction, but it's growing. We are one of 20 Main Street communities in Colorado, and this is indicative of the towns that really want to make something of themselves, from Steamboat Springs to just a whole list of people that are trying to take the benefits of these national programs, lessons learned of a whole bunch of other communities that we can apply to our community. We talk about its volunteer-based program, and we log an average of 2,400 volunteer hours per year for a cost of $72,000 if you were to have to pay these people $23, which is how the state, when you're trying to get grants, they calculate volunteer hours at that rate and say, okay, you put in 72,000, maybe we'll put in 72,000, that sort of thing. So it's very important to have volunteers contributing to this effort. I know I don't have much time, but part of this collaborative effort is we consider our program as kind of the glue that holds everybody together. We have representatives from the City Council, the City of Woodland Park, the Chamber of Commerce, and there are 3 liaisons that are voting members of the board. But we also have other organizations in town that we work very closely with. Downtown Development Authority, Elijah Murphy. Keep Woodland Park Beautiful, who's Jan's the chairman or president of that. Woodland Park Arts Alliance, Laurie Glauth, is also the president of that, or it's maybe chairman. Youth Past Historical Society, Donna Finical is president of that. Kiwanis, we have a lot of service organizations represented. Just an example is Renee Bunting. And then we have the Mountain Arts Council. And Val gets to show up twice on this slide. But these are members of our board, and they're not designated liaison, but they are very active in these other community organizations. Just quickly, this is how we're organized, hopefully after this evening. And then, but I want to focus on this, how we work with local governments, funding partners, and interlocal agreements, okay? We anticipate grants, well, we do get grants, training, organization, technical support from Colorado, both DOLA and CDOT, and Downtown Colorado Inc., and Community Builders, which is a grant organization that we're anticipating to get between $75,000 and $80,000 in grants this next year from them to help us continue on developing the vision, getting rid of the clutter of signs, having standardized signs, that sort of thing. And the neat thing about this too, and it came out recently, is we did this parking and walkability study, and this in the middle of August, and already the city has put a lot more dollars into the sidewalk linkages that we are missing here in this town. CDOT has already agreed they're going to put striping on some of the crosswalks across 24. There's a lot of interaction and immediate response. So you got DOLA saying, hey, CDOT, we think you need to work with Woodland Park. So you have the state people talking to each other as a result of this cooperation. Okay, some people wanted to know what exactly we have accomplished in the last year, other than dollars spent on a particular thing, but we'll do that too. We have provided an information kiosk at Bergstrom Park. I know that's near and dear to David. He's been wanting at least one, if not probably a half dozen throughout town, so that our visitors have nowhere to go and see what events are going to be happening. So we got a $2,500 grant from Main Street, and so we were able to fund that. We got DOLA grant of $5,000, which we partnered with the Woodland Park Arts Alliance and helped with the mural on the side of the UPath Cultural Center. Okay, but in addition to this grant, Main Street went out to all of its mailing list and said, "Hey, how about donating to this?" And I donated because of that request from Main Street to help contribute to this very, very worthy cause. We've done things like photo murals, $2,500 to provide reasons for people to stop and get out and get their picture taken with Pikes Peak in the background and this sort of thing. It's these little art things that also attract people to a town and say, "Hey, let's get out and stop and take a look around." Okay? Woodland Park has also become a favorite destination, and I'll cover some of what that means to our town. But Main Street hosted the first Colorado Downtown Streets workshop, and it was a result of that workshop where we met Jim Charlier, who is a consultant for CDOT, who agreed that we had a problem here with Main Street 24, and he has great influence in CDOT, and we have hired him as a consultant on a step-by-step approach to how do we improve our downtown, and especially pedestrian safety along 24. So I'll say a little bit more about that later as to how we're going to spend money. But other events that we've supported here was the statewide Main Street Managers Summit, and that was just a couple weeks ago. We've had downtown visioning sessions facilitated by DOLA. We've had these walkability and parking studies facilitated by Jim Charlier, who we hired as a consultant. We've had subsequent meetings with CDOT, and Ben here, and I think Jane was in, and Sally. We're all involved with CDOT into making them very responsive and happening. Okay, but we see the city. You know, you're public works director. You got to make this happen. Sally's a planner. You know, these are the sidewalks we need, type of thing. But Main Street also provides the citizens forum for supporting the city, saying, "Hey, these are a top priority for us." Okay, and so. Also on the 7K Broncos run last May, Main Street recruited 150 volunteers to support that effort. Jan was out there giving people their numbers and stuff like that. Renee was providing safety. I mean, I could go down the list. I don't know 150 people. But the but also we help with certified local government received by the city. That's historic. That's Sally's business. Where's Sally? There you are, right there. And we provided help with Sally to get our certification for that, and that increases grant opportunities from the perspective of historic preservation. Okay, as far as the future things that we want to do, Jim Charlier and community builders, who are the grant providers, I was kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. Jim was saying, you need to build on success. You need to take small steps and get better, and then to get to that big thing, okay? And then I hear from city council is, forget small steps, we want it done now, okay? Well, we're going to take a risk and go along with the expert, Jim Charlier, who has done this many, many times for many, many cities, the step-by-step approach of building success upon success. But these are the things that he recommends that we be doing next. And it mostly has to do with safe signs, wayfinding signs, with getting rid of the sign clutter along Main Street, having some standardization. And already CDOT has said, hey, we're on board with helping you with the signs, because they got a third of the signs out there, I think. And of course the city's got a bunch, and the business has got a bunch. And we're going to try to take care of that problem in the very near future. But we're not going to ignore the problem of 24, especially on the north side, where the sidewalks are very narrow. We're asking Jim to say, is there a small step that we can do with regard to 24? In other words, if the lane, this is just a straw man, if the lanes are a bit wider than are required, if we could cut a foot off of each lane, that would give us extra room along the north side where we could put these barrier planters that were kind of in the concept design we presented a couple years ago, that would provide some of that interim pedestrian safety, for example. So now, as I mentioned, we've partnered with DOLA, CDOT, and the health folks and funded a $3,900 downtown rest area set. You come into town, its rest area is a mile ahead. Okay, you get a mile there, where's the rest area? Well, we finally have a sign saying, hey, here's the rest area. And in that regard, Main Street volunteers went and painted all the toilets in that building there in Bergstrom Park. And we would like to do similar things with the baggage building too. I hope you like that. Everybody like that? Okay, thank you. We've collaborated with Keep Woodland Park Beautiful and applying for and receiving the $20,000 Lowe's grant for downtown improvements. We secured a DOLA grant for $2,500 and provided the grant funds to Woodland Park Arts Alliance for the Antler Alley Arches. Okay, so we'll go ahead and ask for the money, and then we'll give it to somebody else. This is kind of unusual, okay, but that's the way we collaborate with each other. Main Street, we partnered with Builder Generation and the city in hosting the 4th of July events, which had brought like 4,000 attendees to the city. We recruited the volunteers, we secured sponsors, that's money. We've developed promotional materials, we've marketed the event, we contracted attractions, and we then hosted also a Main Street booth. So we were deeply involved in these 4th of July events. And some pictures of the 4th of July. Furthermore, Main Street supports small businesses. And you can see what's happened over the last month or two, how small business have really supported Main Street. We obtained DOLA off-site grants for marketing downtown opportunities. The city's not paying for this, DOLA's paying for it. We consistently visit with local businesses, and we're going to be holding quarterly coffees so that we can find out, on a routine basis, what are the problems that businesses have. We support them by website links, promotional ads, all these other things listed down there, and bottom two lines where we cross-promote business opening hours, like for instance the Parade of Lights. In the past, all these businesses closed down, even though you got all these people just outside the front door, okay? And we are working with those businesses to stay open. You take advantage of having all these people here. And we worked also with Vino Nights and other major events. Big thing we did last year was this small business revolution. Through our efforts, we were selected as one of 8 cities, towns in the United States, finalists for being eligible for a $500,000 grant. They were going to split this. Half of it would go to 6 small businesses where they would provide support, and the other half was going to go, in general, to the downtown, to the city. We didn't quite make the list, but getting ready for that, we had the governor's office involved, we had politicians all up. We even contacted the states in the whole mountain region, because we were the only town in the mountain time zone that was on this list. We said, hey, Why doesn't Montana support us? Okay, so that was a huge effort, and unfortunately we didn't get in the final 5. But the publicity that worked, all the people working together to make this happen, was just fantastic. Okay, and they did give us a video that we could use to promote our team, our town, and I could click on it right there, but I don't have that much time, so we'll skip it for right now. But again, we promote and participate with partner events such as the Chamber of Commerce Business Expo, Main Street purchase, where we purchased a booth, and we provided information on projects and everything about Main Street. But we also, the Chamber also contributed towards these studies on parking and walkability. So it was a two-way street. We supported them, they supported us, which is great. Okay, so here we're talking about the Woodland Park cleanup, keep the Woodland Park beautiful cleanup in May. This year it got postponed to June, I guess. But we actively participate in that too. We get volunteers, we secure the tools and equipment you can see there. And the year before this, we also coordinated the power washing. We got 3 firms to bid, and we selected one, and we power washed downtown. And we hope to be able to do that in the future sometime. Okay, so the question is, how much money is this costing us? Okay, the city general fund support in 2017 was $15,000 operating costs, $10,000 for capital, $29,000 for plus benefits for our part-time coordinator, Darlene Jensen. The total budget is $56,000. Put it in this perspective, we are 0.05% of the city's budget. Okay. Now, some people say, well, we put in $56,000 and we only got $10,000 or $12,000 in projects back. That's not a good return on investment. But we're not talking about those 5,000 or 10,000 projects. Well, you give us 10,000 new projects, and that really goes into a lot of the stuff we've done. But we also get grants from others. Now, we're anticipating that we will get $5,500 from DOLA. Well, you can read this. And we get contributions from other sources. Now, we are like one step away from being a designated community in which our grant totals can double. We need 2 things to get that. One was we got national accreditation, and that is one of the checkoff boxes you have to do in order to get designated. And the only other ones that are remaining are the strategic plan, which the Main Street Board will approve on Tuesday, I'm hopeful, and the financial plan, which hopefully Council will approve a portion of that. Hopefully it's a considerable portion, at its meetings in December, on the 7th and the 21st, as far as providing that, the funding financial plan. That will wrap up that. So we anticipate early in the new year we would become a designated Main Street community, which will allow us to progress with these further plans about improving our downtown. So, you can read that. I don't need to. Okay. And you can read it off your packets too. Anyway, this is our final slide. We're quoting our dear mayor. He says, I want a briefing that's more than antlers and benches. And this is it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Council, we'll open up for questions. I know that Jan Wilson, wants to speak at some point. Jan, you want to come now? I have no one else signed up on my sheet for Main Street participation. If anybody after Jan would like to speak up, you're more than welcome.
Mayor, man,
Sir?
We got some more stuff in here. Was this part of what you're going to talk about?
No. Jan Wilson, 108 West Midland Avenue. The only thing that I would ask is please incorporate that packet that you have into the record. That's
we provided you includes this briefing. It provides one of the brochures, which I didn't even mention in here. We had a Near Nature, Near Perfect, nature wildlife brochure that went with the historic tour of Woodland Park, which says, okay, at stop number 1, you'll see this as far as history is concerned, but you'll also see this where nature, flora and fauna is concerned. That was just one of the promotional things that we've done. Also in that packet, we have a kind of a matrix as to what the Main Street program has done, and so it's probably in more detail. I thank Val Carr for having prepared that. Did you work for that?
No.
Okay, well, I just got it from him, so it must have come from other places, whatever. Anyway, so that's also available for further reading. And I'm sorry if I've gone over time. I'm not really sure how many minutes I had.
7.
What?
You had 7.
7? Oh, okay, we really went over time. But I thank you very much. Any other questions?
Sit tight there, Bob. John?
What?
I got a question, Bob. I got the impression from listening to you to talk about the supporters and funds you're getting. Do those come with strings, or can you in fact use most of them for whatever you next priorities?
Well, when we make a request for a grant, the grant is provided based on the justification we're given. And if they need more justification as to goals and what we're trying to achieve, that gets ironed out in the grant process. But just talking about the Community Builders Grant, they're talking about 75 to 80,000 range, and they're looking for a matching fund of 10%. So we would need like $7,500 to $8,000 to match the grant we would get from them. But also, when it comes to grants, most places we've been in contact with do not pay for administrative expenses. They'll pay for a program, but they won't pay for administrative expenses. And thank you for bringing that up, because Darlene is a really workhorse, and she's getting paid a very small wage and only 28 hours a week. Now, if we didn't have her, this program would fail, because none of the workload that she does would any individual volunteer be able to take on. It's just too much effort. Now, I'm also on the Woodland Aquatic Project Board of Directors, and there we didn't get a penny from the city. So I come into the Main Street, what's this retreat? And what's this? I mean, I said, boy, these guys are living off the hog. and I said, okay. But this year, we did reduce what was in 17 going into 18, and we're trying to cut out. We're not going to take any retreats and have volunteer appreciation dinners and all of that kind of stuff. So we do still need some support for administration, because they aren't covered by grants, and there's a lot of administrative effort. We could do that as a Woodland Aquatic Project because it was just us. We weren't responding to a national organization, but the amount of paperwork and checking off boxes and all that documentation we've had to produce, it consumes lots of hours, and certainly if we had to do that for the Woodland Aquatic Project, we wouldn't have a pool, because nobody's willing to put that time, even me. So anyway, thanks. Anything else?
How do you fund a consultant that you hired for $5,000?
We funded that from Sally Riley, put up a little bit of city money, a couple thousand. We had Chamber of Commerce put up a little bit of money, and Main Street paid the difference from our 10,000 you give us for projects. But that's an example of collaboration. DDA was also prepared to give us some money too, 1,000 or two, but because of their legal situation and stuff, they didn't know how much they had available.
Is that consultant still on a retainer? Are you still using?
Well, he's standing by for the next increment. Okay?
And where will
But-
that increment come from?
Well, we're hoping that, it would come from, if we got this grant from the community builders, they would come up with 75 to 80, and we would need to come up with that matching grant of $7,508 or $8,000, whatever that in that range.
So he has completed his task for 2017?
Yes.
And you have paid him $5,000?
Yes. Yeah.
CLM's been writing about the new tax plan going through and the effects that it may have on Main Street, on DOLA grants and historical preservations. Have you been
I haven't
keeping
followed
abreast of that?
No, I don't get the CML newsletter anymore.
There may be an impact to your organization.
Yeah, there's a lot of things happening in the world. I brought a document this evening that addresses USA Waters, okay, which has a huge impact on the drainage in the Saddle Club property, where it's going to cost us $1 million to fix. They're reviewing that rule right now and probably going to kick it all out, where none of that will apply to that. That'll save the city $1 million right there when it goes to sell that property. So, I mean, these are just incidental little things that we're able to. It's like a huge networking situation where we have all these groups getting together and being able to share each other's problems and issues and resolve them collaboratively.
Bob, I love the fact that you're working together. Nobody's going to dispute that. If you had to, $56,000 that the city gave you this year, plus all the grants, tell me the outcome that you're hanging your hat on for 2017, and tell me how that made our downtown Main Street better. And I would love to hear from anybody in our community that would come up and works in the downtown. Trust me, I say this all the time. I've been in business here 25 years. I know exactly how hard it is to do business in this town. I would love 2 or 3 people from Main Street to come up and say, you know what, without Main Street, I just wouldn't be here today. But let's wait on that. First, give me the outcome that you want to hang your hat on for 2017 that would convince all of us here that we've got to do that, because without Main Street, we don't have what?
Okay. I've seen what there are other proposals, compromises that have been in the works, and I believe Val came in with the 2010 whatever, declining over time. We would be willing to live with the 20 for admission.
You're not answering my question, Bob.
You said, what's the bottom line for us?
No, I want to know the outcome for 2017. We gave you $56,000. Tell me what Main Street did in 2017, other than, and I get it, the collaboration, and we got a lot of people working together. Love it. What's the outcome?
Okay. Just from the 2 studies, walkability, parking study, we're making significant progress with the CDOT and getting their support for making improvements to 24, putting crosswalk signs, and helping. They said they would be willing to help with the signage issues. So we're getting increased cooperation from them. We also have a sidewalk plan now, the priorities, and the city has put that in the budget for sidewalks. As far as I'm concerned, we probably could use all the sidewalks that were in that plan and get it done shortly. But that would be my personal opinion. I think we could do that. But we're not. I mean, how can we show we can claim credit for the sidewalks or whatever? Because it's the city that's doing that, but it was a result of actions that we took as Main Street to get this going.
And that cost $56,000?
What? The 29 plus benefits is 32 for the Main Street coordinator. We need to have a Main Street coordinator. We're willing to live with a smaller amount in 2018 for that. We're willing to cut a whole bunch of stuff out of administration things like volunteer dinners and stuff like that. So we're willing to take a significant cut to the administrative side of this. We would like to have the 10,000, or you can make it 8,000 for our matching grant with the community builders, because that will then move on to take care of signage issues, wayfinding issues, and even some initial improvements to 24. Jim Charlie is a traffic engineer. He's not a cityscape designer. So we've hired him, because of his influence with CDOT, to come up with a phased approach to being able to improve the pedestrian safety and walkability and the attractiveness of downtown. Yes, Paul.
Do you believe you've come closer to pedestrian safety with Highway 24?
We haven't done anything with 24. Well, other than the HOC system, and that is another thing.
From 2017, with your negotiations, with your advisor and all of that, and CDOT and all your meetings, conversations, and cooperations between the organizations, do you feel that in 2017 you've come closer to having better cooperation from CDOT to have a safer walkability downtown? Do you think you will be successful if you're allowed to move on with finances from the city at some level to complete this project? And also, you mentioned Fountain Creek and the waterways. Is that a benefit to the city that you're working on, that maybe in the future you'll be able to nail that down and there be benefits to the city on that?
I'll address the second thing. In Fountain Creek, through the Saddlefield property, I brought this to give it to Tanner Coy. Is Tanner here this evening? Because I found out about it actually reading Understanding Trump. Anybody read that book? Okay, Understanding Trump. And it talked about changing this Water USA rule. And I said, oh, okay, I got to tell Tanner. It's one of the things about partnering and networking. But on the first thing, yes, I think we have a new collaboration with CDOT. One of the things we found out in our meetings with CDOT was that if they were to do 24 today, it would be totally different than what they did on 24 in 2070 or 1970. They are now putting a lot of weight on pedestrian safety too, not just cars driving through town as quickly as they possibly can. We have a new attitude at CDOT, and already it's shown results. When the city met with CDOT and they said, yeah, we'll work with you on signs, we'll work with you on putting stripes, crosswalk stripes. And I think this is, if we follow Jim Charlier's recommendations, this will lead to some greater successes on pedestrian safety on 24.
Carol?
I do appreciate the collaboration that has occurred with the Main Street organization since its initiation, and its cooperation with some of the other existing groups to include the city. But nowhere in your presentation tonight have I saw a reason for continued administrative assistance from the city. Thank you.
Well, we don't need to have to pay for any administrative assistance from the city, because our plan was to separate Main Street from the city, and we will have our own office space at the professional building. They've offered us a room free of charge to move into. But what we still want to have collaboration with the city is with Sally on the planning stuff. She's deeply involved in sidewalks and signage and all of this stuff. It's essential. Also with Ben, they're the ones that are going to be implementing these things. If CDOT says, and also CDOT, if they do something with 24, 24 ends here and the city starts here with sidewalks, it's going to take collaboration between the city to implement the sidewalks, building sidewalks. So yeah, we still plan on depending on city experts to work to implement these ideas that our consultants come up with.
Great. Thanks very much, Bob.
One
more question.
How much money in grants in 2017 was brought to the city? Do you know?
It's in one of the slides.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you, sir.
Another question.
Go ahead, John, sorry.
Based on what it is you hope to accomplish next year, what are your total funding requirements? And how much of that do you expect to be funded by grants?
We would expect that the community builders grants to be about 75 to 80,000, as I mentioned before, of which we would have to pay about a 10% cost share. So we would like to have that matching grant money in order to get that 75 to 80,000. Okay, that's 10% to 90%. It's pretty good return on investment. As far as the other grants, we will continue to get grants from DOLA. Instead of getting 5,000, we'll get 10,000 for each mini grant, and as a consequence of being a designated community. We will continue to get grants from DOLA for attending training, scholarships for training, Main Street meetings, that sort of thing. But we still need to pay for our Main Street coordinator. She is, Darlene has agreed that she would accept less than what she's currently getting. But I think she's worth more than she's currently getting. But I leave that up to council to determine whether it should be more, equal, or less than what you've been traditionally given in the past. But I can say this, is that she has been a real workhorse and is basically the reason for the success for our program. So, but no matter how much you pay her, she's still underpaid, in my view.
No?
You keep talking about being a designated city and doubling the grant money. Is there a timeline to that?
There's no timeline of when you become designated. But I said earlier, it's been taking us this 3 years to get work our way up that hierarchy. Okay,
right.
And so we are now like 2 submissions away from a designated community. And earlier in the next year, in 2018, we will become a designated community. Okay.
Do we have to pay someone to write those things down to be a designated?
Well, certainly our Main Street coordinator pulls all this together and writes the final grant request. I mean, that's one of the many things, onerous task, that very few individuals would want to take on as a volunteer.
So when you've been around the workshops enough, I talk about needs and wants.
Right.
You really want to be a designated so you can get some more money. Does it have to be tomorrow?
Well, irregardless of what council does tonight, we will be a designated community in January.
That's great to hear.
What?
That's great to hear.
Yeah, because we only have those 2 documents to submit, and they're written. Okay. I mean, as soon as you pass a budget, we can say that's the number of cities give. So we'll have a financial plan. And so then we can be a designated community. It doesn't take too much effort to submit those documents. And we might as well take advantage of it. We will finally have achieved recognition, national, state, as Main Street community. We can put our little fancy sign out front.
So say Woodland Park becomes designated. Do you have any projects, 2, 3-year, 5-year projects that you would use that money for?
Our immediate goal is this next year, take advantage of the budget you have for the sidewalks and start connecting those sidewalks. There's big gaps all over the place. That's one thing we would like to see. We would like to then take care of, in this next year, take care of all the wayfinding signs and standardized business signs and that sort of thing. And then maybe even have recommendations to CDOT on some initial efforts, low dollar cost, like lane widening or narrowing and putting in some barriers, that sort of thing. Our plan for next year is not ambitious, but it is ambitious for the following year, when we would have CDOT and all of their grant money to actually do something more substantial to improving Highway 24 and pedestrian safety along it.
National designation does not guarantee grant money. It just allows them the opportunity to double the amount that they would apply for.
Correct. I understand.
but they've always given us the grants.
Here, I've got a solution for Highway 24. We take Tweeds, we make it a school, and then all of Woodland Park is a school zone, and everybody would have to go to 25. So we'll talk to Ken.
Let's try to finish this conversation. Val, you'll be last.
I just heard something that keyed clarification for me. You mentioned that once the city passes the budget, then we can hand in these designation documents. Could you clarify that? Because I didn't know the budget was... What do you mean by that, please?
Well, like I said, the budget is a financial plan. And it's not just the city money, it would be all grant money that comes in too, including private donations, which isn't too much. But we have received 7,000 in private donations last year, and we received 5,000 in 2015. And so we do get those. But what was the question again?
You mentioned that we can hand in these two documents as soon as we pass the budget.
Yeah.
So that's...
Yeah, and it doesn't take any additional money in 17.
The city budget or the Main Street budget?
In the Main Street budget to do that.
Oh, okay. Now I understand.
Yeah, well, hopefully the Main Street budget will stay intact for this year. I mean, we only got a month and a half left of this year, and we're hoping that later on the agenda, where my request for the money transfer, the personnel transfer, the file transfer, etc., that will be approved, and that would help us to get to the end of the year. But we look forward mostly to what happens in 18 at this point.
Bob, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will move on. Consent calendar, Suzanne?
Thank you, Mayor Levy. This evening we have one item on the consent calendar, and it's the approval of the minutes from the November 2nd regular City Council meeting.
Suzanne?
Sir?
I have two minor corrections.
Yes.
To the minutes. Looking on page 8, next to the last paragraph, you say council member, and you have no name after that.
Council discuss the special conference with council member.
Okay. I will look at my notes and...
Okay.
Thank you.
Second one is on page 10, third paragraph from the bottom. Third line, there's a statement that David made that doesn't quite make sense the way it's written. Decrease in revenue.
I'm not seeing where you're talking about. Page 10.
Page 10, third paragraph from the bottom. Third line of that paragraph. At the end of the second line and the beginning of the third line.
Okay, thank you.
Would roughly, I think, cause a decrease. Insert the word cause in front of A.
Yep.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, let's make a motion to approve the consent calendar with those changes.
So moved. Second.
Thank you. Suzanne?
Matthews?
Yes.
Sonier?
Yes.
Sawyer?
Yes.
Schaefer?
Yes.
Carr?
Yes.
Harvey?
Yes.
Levy?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
John, thank you, and Suzanne, thank you
Thank you.
for that. We have no unfinished business tonight, nor ordinances on initial posting. So we're coming to a quasi-judicial hearing, and we'll start with this. Council members use electronic devices to access the materials relevant to the public hearing before us. Be assured that it is the common practice of the City Council that these devices are not being used for texting, emailing, or other communications during public hearings. Thank you, and Laura Pellegrino.
Thank you, Mayor Levy, members of council, staff, and members of the audience. My name is Laura Pellegrino. I am the city planner. I'm here tonight to present a development case. It is the final plat for Paradise of Colorado, number 3, filing number 3. Subdivision SUB 17-005. That's the application number. It is a request by North Peak Properties LLC, who is the property owner, and Mark McNabb of Mark 8 LLC, who is the applicant. And Mr. Mark McNabb is here tonight and is available to speak should council so desire. This is an application for a major subdivision of 1.93 acres. It includes 3 lots and a portion of a right-of-way, Peregrine Court, in the west half of Section 19, Township 12 South, Range 68, west of the 6 p.m. in the city of Woodland Park. Today is November 16, 2017, and is the established and scheduled public hearing on this quasi-judicial case. This is the site location map showing the general location of the development in question. As you can see, it is in the far east portion of the city. This shows you Highway 24 as it cuts through Woodland Park and Highway 67 as it travels north. So the area that this 3-lot subdivision is occurring in is at the far eastern portion. This dotted line, which is probably difficult to see on the TV screens, but is the boundary of the city of Woodland Park, and to the east of that is the Pike National Forest. So we go on to an aerial photo which depicts some of the current topography and some of the vegetation that is in this area. What is highlighted in red is the proposed 3-lot subdivision, numbered from 1 to 3 from north to south as you go down. This is Majestic Parkway coming in to a roundabout, heading north on Spacious Skies, and this is the Peregrine Court right-of-way that is also being platted with this final plat tonight. So this gives you an idea of what the 3 lots look like and the portion of the right-of-way currently look like today. Pretty much undisturbed. A small stub of Peregrine Court has been built, but today is the final plat for it, which is when it will be dedicated as a public right-of-way. And you can see that Peregrine Court has been built up to the water tower. The city does have a water tower at the end of this driveway. Right now is a driveway up here, but ultimately when future development occurs, it will be platted and dedicated to the city as another public right-of-way. So what this shows you is, again, that the general topography on these 3 lots is fairly flat, and it is well vegetated. This is a zoning map showing you, again, here are the 3 lots, the area where the 3 lots are going to be platted, and shows you that the entire area around this 3-lot subdivision is residential, and this is a 3-lot subdivision for residential development and residential uses. It is the suburban residential zone, and of course to the west is the high school, the aquatic center, and that entire public land, a semi-public land, a PUD area, a residential area just south of the high school, and we see another public land, public, semi-public zone district for the cemetery just south of that. So again, this is a residential area, it is zoned residential, and the final plat, the purpose is ultimately a 3-lot residential subdivision.
Question. Would you point out on one of these maps where the existing residents are located?
Where the existing residence, where it's been built out?
Yes.
Okay. So the next slide shows a preliminary plat showing platting for over 190 residential lots in the entire master planned area. What you can see is the 3 lots that have been highlighted here off of Spacious Skies, and everything pretty much to the south and west as you go down this direction has been platted and is built out. Now, built out may not mean there's an actual residence on it yet. It may be a vacant lot, but it has been platted. What has not been platted, Councilmember Schaefer, is a lot of this area you see to the north of this red line. So that hasn't even been platted yet. There are no final plats. There are no lots. It's just raw vacant land. And then you'll see that to this area that is east of the 3-lot subdivision, this area right in here where the word site is, that has not been final platted yet either, and that is all vacant raw land. And then some of this development that you're seeing to the south here, again, unplatted vacant land.
John, I can point out to you where there are existing homes on that strip. There's 4 or 5 now.
Where are they located? Back up.
Yeah.
for my question.
Yeah, can you see them on this map? There's
So this is an aerial photo, and it shows two of the homes that have been built on Regal Way, for instance. It does not show a parade home that was built here on Spacious Skies,
and there's
so it's not quite up to date.
Yeah, and there's one across the street from that that's almost completed. And then on Thunder Ridge, I believe there are now 4.
Yes. So this doesn't show all of the built out, but what we're seeing is that a lot of these lots in Paradise Estates and previous plattings are getting built as we speak.
The reason for my question is there are some residences there that have suffered flood and water damage, and significant in at least one case. I'm not familiar really with the topography we're looking at here, but evidently the drainage retention pond was insufficient in capacity, and so those homes have suffered some serious damage. For some reason, nobody knew about that for a while. I'm just curious if how that's going to be treated with these new properties, and is there a drainage plan? Have the criteria changed? How do we guard against other drainage problems for these 3 lots?
Very good questions, Councilmember Schaefer. And what you'll see is that tonight there will be a presentation by members of the community similar to the presentation that was presented to the Planning Commission. And they'll tell you a little bit, and the rest of council, about some of their drainage concerns. And we dealt with it at the Planning Commission. And as a matter of fact, in the Planning Commission minutes, you'll see that they also recommended that staff look into the drainage issues. And we will be looking into the existing drainage issues and the existing drainage plan that has been adopted. So if I can continue on with my presentation, I will address how we are looking at drainage currently and with this development and holistically for the entire master plan area. Okay. So again, this is the preliminary site, the preliminary platting for the area in which the 3 lots that we're looking at tonight for platting is shown in this heavy red line. And the 3 lots that are coming in along with that portion of the right-of-way of Peregrine Court has been preliminary platted and has been proposed in the configuration that is currently proposed before you for final platting. With this preliminary plat was a complete drainage study that was done for not only these 3 lots, but for all of the lots within this preliminary plan. So that study was referred to by our city engineer when he received the referral for this 3-lot subdivision. And he did look at that study and did conclude that this 3-lot subdivision would not have a major impact on the drainage, and that the applicant will be constructing the drainage improvements pursuant to the construction drawings that were approved by the city. They were approved in approximately 2006, 2007. This preliminary plat was approved in 2005, 2006. So the regulations for the drainage criteria have changed. And we do have a new criteria manual that exists. And these 3 lots that are proposed and before you tonight have been reviewed with the new criteria and have, by our city engineer, deemed to not impact or not have to change in terms of the improvements that the applicant has to provide. Now, a lot of the drainage issues that you'll hear later on when we open public comment will be about drainage not only from this area sloping down through these 3 lots or down Peregrine Court when that finally gets built, but drainage from some of the areas around it that don't emanate from this 3-lot subdivision or even from this eastern edge of Peregrine Court. So I will defer to the community when they come up and make their presentation. And then at any time, if we want to talk about some of the specifics of what exactly the civil engineer did review as part of this application and as part of the entire holistic review of this issue, we can certainly discuss that in more detail. I think it'd be worthwhile to listen to the community and hear their concerns before we get into details. But do know that our city engineer has already been out there. The Planning Commission meeting was last Thursday. He's been out numerous times and met with some of these community members and discussed the issue in great detail with them. So we are on it. All right. So back to this 3-lot subdivision. Again, this is the preliminary plat. Staff does find compliance with this proposed final platting in terms of a 3-lot plat, the configuration of these lots, the size of these lots, and that portion of Peregrine Court. This is the final plat layout, and again, the 3 lots that you're seeing here, which are fairly large size, and the 50-foot right-of-way for Peregrine Court, as proposed in the preliminary plat. These are some site photos for your information. This is from Spacious Skies looking into Lot 1. This is the intersection with Peregrine Court and Spacious Skies, and you can see that it is fairly flat in Lot 1 and Lot 2 and Lot 3. There's a little bit of slope in the eastern edge, but certainly not significant, certainly not 30% slopes. This is looking more into Peregrine Court from Spacious Skies, so you can see that a portion of Peregrine Court, a little stub, was built. And then the applicant will be responsible for building the rest of the infrastructure and all the improvements within Peregrine Court along the northern boundary of Lot 1, which is what we're looking at here. This is the northern boundary of Lot 1. This is from Spacious Skies looking into Lot 3, down at the south end of the proposed final plat. And again, you can see it's fairly flat and very buildable, very developable. So that gives you an idea of what that site looks like. So staff did receive this application, and we do have code compliance and standards that we review any final plat application with. That is the final plat, Municipal Code Section 1724. We received a completed draft final plat, and staff, again, does believe it complies and conforms with the preliminary plat that exists and was approved. That the information shown on it was drawn by a PLS, a professional land surveyor, and that it does conform to our requirements for what needs to be shown and how it needs to be shown on the plat. We did have some minor corrections for the surveyor, and he is working on that. And then the applicant did submit supplemental material for review during this application, things like the engineering plans, the construction drawings, covenants, development agreement, cost estimate, and other items such as that. So with any plat, we look at a design of the 3-lot subdivision. This is section 1740 of the municipal code. We looked at the purpose, and we believe that the purpose for this is to produce 3 lots for residential development, and that this does in fact do that and provides for services and utilities. The site is suitable for development, and we looked at the site consideration. There are adequate and available services for all improvements and infrastructure and utilities, water, sewer, and fire protection, for instance, roads, grading, erosion control, all very feasible with this 3-lot subdivision. For the record, water and sewer already exist under Peregrine Court, and the applicant wouldn't be responsible for that. That's already been accepted by the city, and the applicant would be responsible for things like grading, erosion control for the entire development, 3-lot development plus the road, and they would be responsible for drainage improvements. Some drainage improvements have gone into Peregrine Court and all the way up to the water tower along Peregrine Court, but it is by all means not a complete system yet. But the applicant would be responsible for drainage and asphalt and paving of Peregrine Court and all of the improvements that would go in that portion of Peregrine Court that abuts the northern boundary of Lot 1. And again, that we find that it complies with the streets, alleys, and easements that need to be shown on any plat and any lot within the city. The frontage on each lot is adequate for access and for a buildable lot. The street names and numbers, Peregrine Court, for your information, is not a viable street name and will have to be renamed, and the applicant is currently reviewing different proposals for names for that street. And the Mylar, once produced, will reflect a new name, which has yet to be chosen. Easements are depicted on the plat to the satisfaction of staff and in compliance with the city code. Staff does find that all lots are buildable and feasible for building, and that the land use intensity ratios are feasible, and that a site can be built on these particular lots. So staff does find compliance with all of the applicable and relevant municipal code standards and criteria. This application, like many other applications, has referral requirements, and we did send an application for review by various different internal and external agencies, including the City Public Works Department, the Utilities Department, the Parks and Recreation Department. and then other agencies such as IREA, Northeast Teller County Fire Protection District, Black Hills Energy, CenturyLink, TDS Cable. All of the referrals, any comments received, of which we received very minor comments. If we did receive any comments, they have been incorporated into the staff report and into the compliance standards that you saw in the staff report. We did do public notices for tonight's hearing. We sent out adjacent property owner letters highlighting and indicating that tonight is the public hearing for this particular case to all properties within 150 feet of this particular site. We posted the property with signs, and we did a notice in the Pikes Peak Courier for tonight's hearing. We did refer the application to the Planning Commission, who did make a recommendation, which was attached to your packet, including the minutes of the Planning Commission hearing. The Planning Commission did recommend that Council approve this 3-lot subdivision as proposed, and that staff look into the drainage issues in the neighborhood prior to future development. And that recommendation was in the minutes. So staff has complied with all the referral, public notice requirements, and the Planning Commission referral as well. So staff's recommendation for Council tonight related to this 3-lot subdivision is that based on the findings in the staff report, the Planning Commission's recommendation, testimony and evidence provided at the public hearings forthcoming, and approval that we recommend approval of the final plat of Paradise of Colorado filing number 3 subject to 5 conditions, and they are correct the Mylar as recommended by staff, and add a plat note regarding the 20% maximum site coverage, provide title insurance, policy for the right-of-way portion, provide covenants, provide a development agreement and security for that development agreement, and provide access to platted and unplatted tracts for staff. There's a second motion that must go along with this, and that is approve the subdivision development agreement for Paradise of Colorado number 3 and accept the guarantee in the form of an irrevocable letter of credit as presented. And that was included in the packet that was distributed. That concludes staff's presentation. Are there any questions?
No.
I'm assuming that we're calling this a major subdivision because infrastructure has to be added. Why would these 3 lots not fall under the covenants of the existing filing for that section of the plat?
The covenants that the applicant submitted do almost 95% follow filing number 2, but it is the applicant and the developer's prerogative to establish his own covenants. And the city does not get involved in the establishment of those covenants, nor do we enforce them.
No,
so
I understand.
He chose to have separate covenants for these 3 lots.
So the covenants that he's proposing, you're telling me, are about 95% similar to those that are in the area?
Yes, for filing 2.
And for filing 2. And that would dictate that all single-family homes, no?
Correct.
All right. And is there a minimum of square footage for ground floor?
There is a minimum square footage. Again, staff is not interested in what that minimum is.
But I am.
I would have to look them up in the covenant. Or when the developer comes up, you could certainly ask him.
Thank you.
Anything else before we go to Mr. McNabb? Laura, thank you. I know you'll stand by for more questions. Mark, would you like to come up? Give us your name and address, please, and we'll go from there.
My name is Mark McNabb. I live at 206 Starlight Heights in Divide, and I thank you all for considering our application. And we have been able to work with all the requirements from the city up to this point, and we'll continue to do that to fulfill all the requirements that they have. At this time, we do have a long-standing family from Woodland Park that we're going to be building a house on Lot 1, which is pretty exciting. So I'm open for questions. Laura did such a great job, there's not much for me to say about the project.
Well, Mark, I will ask the question, or 2 questions. I'll start with, why are you going to extend Peregrine Court? Or do you have to? That stub of road
I think
now
it's
called
required by the city because it's in conjunction with Lot 1.
Oh, for Lot 1.
Just to the end of Lot 1.
Okay, okay, so it could be accessed by Peregrine Court or, what is that, Spacious Skies? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And do you plan on using cobblestones?
No.
Okay. I had a question for Laura, and Laura said it really had no bearing on this application, but the covenants that you've developed for this filing, is there a square footage minimum?
We use the same square footage as filing 2.
Which is?
Which is 2,750 square feet, I believe.
Thank you.
Mark, there's a considerable part of that property that's still undeveloped. A, do you own the rest of that property?
No.
You do not. And my second question would be, you mentioned you have one person that's building a house. Are the other 2 under contract, or do you have any?
No.
Nothing there yet?
No.
Thank you. Council?
Another question. You've got a build, or you plan to build on Lot 1, Lot 2 and 3 then would be on the market. If someone were to buy 2, the lot and request a vacation of the lot line, that could occur as well, correct?
Yes.
Council, we have a number of folks that would like to talk from our community, so why don't we go that direction, Mark, and we might get you back here, but thanks for your help. A number of you have signed up, and I'm sorry to say some I just can't read the names as well as I could, so bear with me. First, I think it says Doug Ball. Is that correct? Thank you, Mr. Ball. Come on up, give us your name and address, and we'll go from there.
Good evening, Mayor Levy and City Council members. My name is Doug Ball. I live at 1050 Wintergreen Court and the Paradise Estates subdivision. And I'm here to represent a group of neighbors from Paradise Estates. And we're not here to talk against the proposal before you. In fact, we're for it. But we are here because this development is the first of several developments on the tract of land shown on this slide here. Since our development, Paradise Estates, is downstream of this undeveloped land, how drainage is handled here during and after its development will directly affect our neighborhood. In fact, already has in several flooding events. So I'm prepared to show you this PowerPoint. See this? Basically, run through the area of concern, part of it anyway, and here's the first of 3 lots you see there on Spacious Skies. This potentially, next one is the next proposal, possibly for a development. It's on Majestic Court, and then the last part goes up to the tower. And if you look at this picture, you'll see 2 pictures. One is a drain for the waste for stormwater, and the one below is actually a catch basin with a drain at the bottom, and it actually catches the water from Fountain Creek, which comes from the top of Rampart Range. And we'll see that later. So our concerns are regarding the overall drainage and drainage plan as this new development starts to progress, concern over detention area and its ability to manage the long-term drainage and release down Majestic Parkway, repair and management of temporary detention areas, silt fences, and overflows. So anyway, this area was abandoned about 5 or 7 years ago when the developer went bankrupt. And part of it went to the bank, I believe, and the other part, the eastern part, which is I'll show you in a little bit, went to the daughter of the developer. So these areas need to be inspected and work needs to be done to repair and to protect the downstream residents and ensure these are working as designed through the duration of construction. So here you have here's an aerial of the watershed, And the yellow areas, yellow arrows indicate the direction of the water flow, which end up in a large detention pond located where the yellow dot is. So that yellow dot is just below the roundabout. Detention area is existing. Most of all the storm runoff from the top of Rampart Range down goes into this pond prior to its release down Majestic Parkway. The two areas of undeveloped land are shown here. Above to the left of the roundabout is 28 acres, which was owned by the bank, and which is going to be developed probably fairly soon. And it was the land that I showed on the previous slides. To the right of the roundabout, the east portion of land is owned by the daughter of the original developer. And that's where, and you see that brown line, that's that dirt road right now that goes around that ridge. This is a look from above Rampart Range back towards the development, and then beyond, and then in the background is Majestic Parkway, and you can see the water flow from Majestic. So essentially all the water that comes into the detention pond is held back, but then it flows out onto Majestic Parkway. And here's an aerial of that. So you see the yellow dot is the retention area, and basically that water flows out, and the water goes 1,700 feet, more than halfway down Majestic before you hit the first drain that takes water away, or is supposed to take water away. So not only does Majestic have to convey the water from the detention pond, it also has to carry stormwater being added to it from the Paradise Estates watershed. And during a major rain event, Majestic can turn into a river of stormwater. So now we'll run through the various drains and stuff. So this is the roundabout, and there's two good-sized stormwater drains on the backside towards the development. These two stormwater drains are the last ones just below the roundabout, which drain into the detention pond. And then the features of the detention pond are upper right is an approximately 44-inch diameter pipe which brings all the water into the detention pond from the above land. Upper left is the overflow drain, which is near the bottom of the pond. And then the lower right is the detention pond, the overflow pipe onto Majestic. And then this pond has a emergency spillway at the top, which I don't know if it's ever had to use that or not, but it's on the top of the berm, so it's way above the drain that drains out to Majestic Parkway. This next picture is the drain, it's a 24-inch pipe that water comes out into Majestic Parkway. And then we're going to work our way down Majestic. So up there is the yellow dot, and then you can see the outflow just above that yellow line. And then the first drain. So this is one of the issues concerning us during a major rain event is stormwater carries silt and sand with it and deposits downstream. So the lower right picture is the first storm drain. You can see it, barely see it in front of the garage doors of that house, green garage doors. And inside there is a pile of silt and sand. So it's actually, that drain is the closest thing to the water coming down, all the way down Majestic.
A question.
Yes.
You show 128 feet drop.
Yeah, that's the elevations that we're dropping as we go to these spots.
That's 120 feet over how many linear feet?
1,700 or so.
1,700 down to the first drain.
To this drain here.
All right.
So it's still a pretty good drop. The water picks up speed. The upper left picture is a drainage culvert that runs parallel to the Majestic, and which is silted in and grown over. And then the bottom picture is the main drain. Remember, this is the first stormwater drain of all that water coming down Majestic runs into there. Well, that's like a 24-inch pipe, and it's been collapsed, and it's half full of silt. So the water's just going to try to get in there and keep going. It's not really going to be able to get out into the culvert. So this picture is the next set of stormwater drains on Majestic, which aren't too far down the road. And you can see that white line with the blue dashes, that's the pipe. And then there's it goes into the culvert, and then you see the picture of the culvert there, which is all overgrown. And if you note the big white stones on each side of the culvert, which we'll talk about a little bit here later. And this is another picture down further on the culvert. And then if you look at the culvert, you can see the white stones, and then you can see all the green grass in the middle of it. This next picture is an aerial from 1999. This shows the culvert. There's a yellow circle around it, and it has been related to us by a neighbor who moved here in the late 90s. I think he's here to speak. That the culvert was lined with white stones, sides and the bottom. And if you look at this area, you'll see this white line that's pretty thick, all the way down almost to Paradise Circle, and that's the culvert with the stone in it. And then the question becomes whether the Paradise Estates stormwater design anticipated all the water that's going to come from the new development. Another thing to look at in this picture is if you look to the right up near the top corner, that's just all open space. There's no development up there at all. So that development came later. Then here's the same aerial, present day, and you can see the culvert's totally greened in. So basically it's filled up with silt and grown grass, and so this hasn't been maintained, plus all the silt that's coming down from the properties above us.
And at least 2 skunk families. I walk by it every day.
And if you look at the bottom of this circle, near Paradise Circle, you'll see the detention pond, which there was one there, overflow structure, which is concrete. It's like kind of a brown-red concrete. And that's in the next picture. And here you can see the swale for the emergency overflow, and in front of it, in the foreground, you'll see that's the drain. That's the regular drain that the water's supposed to go up to, and then it goes in that drain and comes out a pipe in front of the concrete structure. And right now, the soil level at the drain is approximately 1 foot. So there's only like 1 foot of detention before it goes in the pipe. And again, one of our neighbors who was here in the 90s said that his kids used to play down there. It used to be all rock, and it used to be 3 to 4 feet below the drain. So again, that's how much dirt and silt has come into this drainage system over the years. So this is a picture of one of the areas of flooding problems. When the development was started and then abandoned on open land above Paradise Estates, there's been flooding issues during large storm events. And there are several residents here to speak on that tonight. I'll give you the specifics. This east area to the right is an example of the landowner not maintaining adequate silt fences, sediment and detention ponds, causing flooding and mud to come down into the existing neighborhoods. Anybody have any questions?
Well, I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions.
But I can come back up if you want.
Okay, you know what I'd like to do just to start? For city manager to at least tag on to what John said, tell us a little bit about the events that have happened there flood-wise, and then we will go to the public works director and the city engineer, and you can answer.
I did want to add one more thing. I did meet with Ben out to the site, and we went over all this in detail.
I do have a question, Mr. Mayor. This is an important topic. I live off of Majestic Parkway, so I'm just as concerned as you are. But what bearing will that have on the application that we're reviewing tonight? Should we deal with the application first and then deal with this issue?
Madam Attorney, that seems to make sense to me. I know this is a concern. I know there's things associated with the new development and things associated with the maintenance and the upkeep of things.
I appreciate this report, but I do think we could deal with them separately. I don't want to avoid the issue at all.
No.
We have some history that we can share and also some steps forward, but I'm not exactly sure how this fits in with the quasi-judicial procedures that you're going through right now.
Okay, that said, then, why don't we hear from the other folks in the community, and then we can respond.
Okay.
I'm sure it does. If it pertains to what Doug is talking about in the application, we'd like to hear about that now, and then we can circle back. So, Doug, stay close, because I'm sure we may come back to you. The next name on here, I'm sorry, I can't read. I guess it is Dan Heimerdinger. Sorry. It's like a rocket scientist writing.
Yeah, one of the two. So I'm Dan Heimerdinger. I live at 760 Majestic Parkway, and I'll talk about this last slide in a moment. I want to give a little bit of background. I was the first home on Majestic Parkway when it was built. And that's my house there. And you can see those yellow lines. I'll talk about it in a minute, but you've heard about a home that during the floods, the rains of 2013, July of 2013, I'm the house that had about $80,000 worth of damage done to it. I had no insurance because the water came in from the outside of the house, so that was not covered by the homeowner's insurance. And the water actually, if you look at those yellow lines, there was so much head and momentum from the water that it actually flowed up and over a mild berm and into two of our window wells into the basement. We couldn't stop it. So what we did is we just opened up the back door and tried to move everything through it. We didn't have flood insurance, but flood insurance wouldn't have covered it anyway. We now do have flood insurance, but flood insurance is for a river that overflows as opposed to a man-made activity like this. And so it was a substantial amount of damage. Let me go into a couple things that I think you should know from history. Why aren't there any drains in the road above that? Why does it go 1,700 feet before we get to our first drains? Very simple answer. And we asked this question of Will Brown when we first moved here, or actually bought the property in 1996, before the house was built. My wife asked Will a question, Majestic Parkway. The master plan had Majestic Parkway ending where the Indian is, where the circle is. My wife asked the question, parkways don't end. Aren't you going to extend the parkway? And the answer was no. The answer was they were donating land to the city. There were there's going to be a park at the bottom where the chimneys are, called Chimney Park, that they were going to make into soccer fields. And they were going to donate the land to the town because it was a popular horse riding area and there were many accesses for trails. So we said, fine, okay, whatever, that's wonderful. And as a consequence, there wasn't a need for those drains. And Majestic Parkway was built without any drains. Skyline wasn't there. Thunder Ridge wasn't there. Falcon's Rest wasn't there. When you go back to the picture here of 1999, you can see that is the property that we had. And my child is the one who was playing with someone from the townhomes nearby. And one of the kids actually went in through a drain and into that little beanie cap and thought he was playing submarine guy, and he said he was a submarine guy. That's how deep it was. You were actually able to go in there and get into the drain, and it was kind of creepy. But it was all that white rock. It's now filled with silt. So one of the things that happened is I travel a lot. In fact, my job is unfortunately a lot of traveling. So when they decided to change the master plan and they posted, one, I wasn't here, so we weren't able to respond. And two, if you look where my house is, 760, it is well below where they posted at the circle. So when I walked the dog or did that, I'd walk up from house up the trail. I never walked by where it was posted. So the neighbors and the ability to go and talk about the platting and the expansion, there were no neighbors. There were few neighbors, and it was obscured. Well, it wasn't obscured. It's just it wasn't a well-traveled place to see the notice for the meetings. Regardless, my point that I'm trying to make is that the history of Majestic Parkway was such that Majestic Parkway and the developments that we have and my neighbors who now live up Thunder Ridge, none of that actually was ever supposed to be there when we bought the property. And I think that if you go back to the master plan from 95, 96, you will see that there was nothing anticipated in the master plan to extend beyond Majestic Parkway. In fact, it wasn't a circle that would go up to the various places. There was no plan for a water tower. There were no plans for retention ponds because we had our retention pond, which was that culvert. So the result is, as has happened many times actually, is when we get our monsoons in July, the road becomes a river, an absolute river. In the winter, when the snow melts, the roads become a river and become iced over and become very precarious for walking. In fact, when I had my dog, I would make it a point of not walking on the road because it was so treacherous at times. You'll see that the curbs are drains, are effectively the drains to move the water down the hill. They're not particularly effective when we have our January monsoons, and typically the melts after the big storms. And as you all know, we may get a big storm, the sun comes out, and the next day it melts. Well, if you get 2 or 3 feet of snow and then it starts to melt, it becomes pretty treacherous. So that's really all I wanted to say. My bigger concern is when they start developing, and we can talk about this when the concept comes up for the cluster homes. Majestic Circle, where they, where our neighbor just spoke, Majestic Circle is right above the cul-de-sac that we currently have. Excuse me, the Indian where we have. It looks from the drawings that we see that there are going to be a lot of black-topped over areas. They're going to be very close. And as the water comes down and the water melts, the places it's going to go are into the 2 drains at the circle, which are going to go into the retention pond, which are then going to come down Majestic Park and hopefully not into my 2 window wells. I had to do a substantial amount of work on the house and also the property to try to make sure the water went away. But one of the real things that impacted the cost for us is that when the water came in and it percolated under the soil, it caused my foundation to sink. And I have in-floor heating. And so when they had to take out the foundation and replace all the soil and then compress all the soil and then redo all of the in-floor heating, that was a tremendous cost. That was clearly unplanned and unwanted, and I hope to never have happen again. So that's my tale.
Thanks, Dan.
You bet.
Thank you very much. Well said. Claudia Miller?
Are we continuing to hear on the drainage issue, or are we going to consider the applicant's package?
Council, what would you prefer? Do you want to just consider the applicant package and then talk about the drainage issue afterwards, since there's kind of separate issues?
Carol, you live in this neighborhood.
Well, I am not discounting the drainage issue, but this application for the 3 lots we've already determined has really doesn't have a direct impact on the drainage issue. So I'd like to be able to dispense with that, and then we could talk about the drainage issue.
Well, it sounds like the concern was that it would create more water. And so
I thought we determined that that was not the case, but it could as more development occurs.
Correct.
These three do not have an impact on the current issue.
I wouldn't say these three, but your major development, you're right. I see it as separate, but definitely
related. Something
that needs to be addressed immediately for future development.
Well, let's do this, and let's ask the remaining people in here. Are you going to speak to the applicant or to the drainage? If you want to speak to the drainage, let's hold off on that. And clearly, we have a discussion there at some point. Let's talk about the application now, and we'll move on to the drainage. So, I've got Claudia Miller. Do you want to talk about the drainage? Or do you want to talk about the applicant? Good. I'm sorry. Just come forward. Give us your name and address.
Claudia Miller, live at 810 Majestic Parkway, and the question I have is we're the second house down, and we've had flooding in 2010, major flooding that hit our crawl space, but we were hit by the flooding coming over the gutter on the street side, but we also had like a mini river coming to the backside, and that goes up more towards that area where they're going to be doing some of that development. I'm not an engineer, but it did cause it was frightening, and I know that we had some work done. We had a contractor come in, and he recontoured. He put in one of the French drains, and then he put cement on the one side of the house so that the water would drain away from it. But our neighbor down below us, he's still getting the river floods when they come, and that's to the backside. So I just question, and I'm not an engineer at all, but just wondered if some of that, we know that the detention pond, we're thinking it came off some of the side of that, but the runoff's a little different than just coming from on the road. So that's the question I have, and
we'll address that. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor.
Sir.
Thank you. I think the question comes up. I read the packet. I don't have the packet printed out in front of me, but I remember the Planning Commission was very concerned about the drainage. I didn't see that it was a future recommendation, but I think that's why we're getting those things mixed together. So I think that's why we're recognizing with a courtesy to the people about the drainage, knowing that it's not really part of the application, but part of the...
Great. Yeah, that's why I asked, just so we can kind of make a determination. So I've got one more on here, and then anybody else. We want to speak about the project right now, not necessarily the drainage. So, Deanne Pilger, is she here? Yeah. Okay. No. Okay. Anybody else want to talk relative to the applicant right now? Sir, if you want to come forward and give us your name and address.
My name's Bill Miller, and I live at 810 Majestic Parkway. Claudia's my wife. The only thing I want to add is we did look at elevations from Chimney Park to where the roundabout is, and that's about 190 feet in elevation change. And then if you go from there to the water tower, it's over 200 feet. So even though we're not saying we have a problem with the 3 lots, they are not flat, and the pictures don't depict the slope, because there is a slope. Anybody that walks up there knows there's a big slope even between our house and up on Peregrine. So I just want to point that out, that there is that. So.
Thank you. Tony, would you like to come up?
Tony Perry, 330 Ponderosa Court, and I don't want to speak to the quasi-judicial proceeding because I think that's the question here tonight, but I did want to lay the groundwork for the future real quickly. I'm also with the bank, and we unfortunately obtained the property at the end of 2010, 2011, and what I will say is that at great expense and at wanting to maintain the integrity of the entire neighborhood, we took an unusual approach for a bank in that we didn't do a fire sale on the property. We determined that that would be detrimental to all the neighbors, and so we proceeded. We went through the process of deeding the water tower to the city, turning those roads over. Every single day since we've had the property, either myself or Chuck Mahoney has driven through that subdivision every single day. We completed the stormwater drainage plan for the previous developer because that was not completed, and got state compliance on that. We take great pains. We actually have several parties who go through, and I think if your neighbors, you know, you see Kelly out there picking weeds in the cobblestones and keeping everything cleaned up. Every year we go through and do beetle kill mitigation on the property. And we've purposely been very careful at maintaining those covenants, finding good neighbors that are moving into the community, that are contributing to the community to add value to the neighborhood. So what we've observed, and again, this is this last week that we heard about drainage issues further down Majestic, but we were curious too on the detention ponds, and neither Chuck Mahoney nor I, since the end of 2010, have ever seen that detention pond even come close to getting filled. And we drive by it every day. So we're going to defer to the city. We're going to defer to the engineers. I could talk to the future development. Yes, these 3 lots are what the question is tonight, and there's no reason to stop that. But I want to offer that because of our role and our role with the other future development, we want to make sure that you understand that we're here to communicate. We want to be a good neighbor. We've demonstrated that since 2010. We'll continue to do that. Any development up above will not be, I don't want to talk about the previous developer. I don't want to talk about the property that we have no control over. But I can guarantee that filing 2 that the bank still owns. We have 4 new homes going on in there in the next year. Lots 9, 10, probably 23, 26, 24. Our goal is to not own that property. But we also are related to the owner of the upper parcel now. And I could tell you that when that development comes, it will come. It will be done right. It will be engineered right. It will be done in compliance, working with the city and talking to the neighbors. So I do want to offer that if you want to have a neighborhood meeting to discuss economic impacts, and all those other impacts that could affect your assets, if you will, your homes, we want to just lay the groundwork that we're here, we're a neighbor, and we will make sure that it works for all of us. I will tell you that the upper part, we have 3 old lady dogs too, and most of you have dogs that walk up through that property. I could tell you the majority owner of that is a major dog lover, so we're going to take great care to not limit access to that for the hiking trails. I can't speak to the property on the north side, west side, whatever that is. Yeah, but I can speak to, through this new future development, it will be dog friendly. As a matter of fact, we have doggy stations planned for 4 areas throughout the development. For the lower piece, we'll be putting those in the spring, and there will be going up even to the water tower. So just want to lay the groundwork that tonight the question's easy. It's going to be more difficult moving forward, but we're going to work with you. We want to work with the city, work with the neighbors on the portion that we control as property owners, and we will do right by you and right by the community. The other, hopefully we can get some resolution on that as well. So,
I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Hold on. You own the property. It came to you through a bankruptcy. It was undeveloped, probably stripped of vegetation. No?
Not true.
Oh, okay.
It was, Filing 2 was completely developed with completed lots, just no cells. We've actually accomplished recruiting good neighbors into the community.
How did the detention pond get filled up with sediment, if I'm hearing them correctly?
I don't know what detention pond they're talking about.
It's not? Okay, that's why I rely on you.
I'll speak to some of the history as it relates when we're done with the quasi-judicial review for the applicant.
And I didn't want to come up because it's not related to the quasi-judicial review, but I did want to lay the groundwork for the neighbors that the rest of that property will be done right. We've done everything right by the book since day one, and we'll continue to do so. At great expense, I might add. I don't even want to show you the balance sheet. So,
thank you, Tony. Thanks for your leadership, really, and working together. That's a huge project. I'm familiar with the expense there. Sir?
One quick comment. Yeah, my name's Dan London. I live at 811 Majestic. I lived there a little less than a year. So some of the concerns there. We didn't have any problem to the 3, so we can move on from there. I think the thing was for us to raise this because we know Northwest Properties is going to develop the rest of that. And to have, and what we would like to see is the motion that was put forth with the Planning Commission to hold off any more approvals until the studies are done up there and those are brought before the community, and we can agree on what's going to be done to remediate that and protect us.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And the great thing about this conversation is everyone seems to be in favor of filing 3, and clearly we're going to have some further discussion about the drainage as we move forward. So let's stick to the QJ right now, and then we will go from there. Council, do you have any other questions relative to Laura's presentation? And if we don't, we'll call for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Do I need to read that into the record?
And I believe there were 2 motions.
There are 2 motions.
On motion 1, move to, based on the findings in the staff report, approve filing 3 with subject to 5 conditions, correct the Mylar and add plat note, reference the 20% maximum site coverage, provide title insurance policy for the right-of-way, provide covenants, provide development agreement and security, and provide access to platted and unplatted tracts.
Should we take these one at a time, Suzanne?
Need a second.
Okay. I think we had a second from John. Yes. Great. Thank you, Suzanne.
Saunier,
Yes.
Sawyer,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yes.
Carr,
Yes.
Harvey,
Yes.
Levy,
Yes.
Matthews.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Move to approve the subdivision development agreement for Paradise of Colorado number 3 and accept guarantee in the form of an irrevocable letter of credit as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Suzanne?
Sawyer,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yes.
Carr,
Yes.
Harvey,
Yes.
Levy,
Yes.
Matthews,
Yes.
Saunier.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Suzanne. We have 2 more public hearings. Should we wait for your report? You want to talk about the drainage and the history now?
I'm happy to do that now so that the folks that came for this can head on their merry way this evening. So thank you very much for your information and the report that I had a chance to look at later. I want to give a little bit of history as well. I got here in 1997 as the Public Works Director, and so Majestic Parkway had been built. I actually think that the channel that was lined with the white rocks was one of the projects that I had some responsibility for. Sally, would you come to the podium, because I'm going to tag team with you a little bit on history. What I'm hearing from the folks is we absolutely need to do some maintenance on the detention pond that's at the bottom of Majestic Parkway, to include the swale that was lined with rock, to include the culvert that feeds from there. As we make our way further up the hill, Dan, that was the first time I'd heard that Majestic Parkway was never intended to go all the way through. And no, I understand. I'm going to ask Sally to speak to that here in just a second. What I do remember was that at the top of that, near where the neighborhood mailbox units are now, there was a small detention pond with that outfall that came out into Majestic Parkway. As the master plan was being created for that upper area, that detention pond was enlarged to carry, to handle all that flow. You're shaking your head no.
No. And I'm sorry. You'll just need
So it may not matter. The detention pond was enlarged when Will Brown brought forward the next iteration. So just a little bit on hydrology and hydraulics. We have detention standards that say that we capture and release at historic rates. We capture the part of the 2-year storm, the 5-year storm, and the 100-year storm, and we release it at those historic rates. So the theory is that no matter what drains into a bathtub, the drain only lets out what historically came there anyway. When you have a 100-year storm event, the roads are going to get overtopped. Roads are designed to carry the 10-year storm. So when you have a major storm event, and we've had a few of those, I remember the 2013 storm, I remember the 2010 storm, the roads are going to be overwhelmed with the storm. I don't know, I think I know where your house is. My guess is you're downhill of the road. Your floor elevation is below the road elevation. So when the water comes over the curb, it's somehow going to make its way into your house. It may not be right there beside it, but further uphill. So if you're down in a hole, water is going to come into the downstream side. Again, what I've taken from this is we need to do some maintenance on the culvert, the swale, and the lower detention pond, and then we'll absolutely make sure that the detention pond at the upper end meets our new drainage criteria for when the new development occurs. Now, Sally, what history do you have on Majestic Parkway going through or not going through? And then I'm going to ask Ben to talk about some of the things he's seen in visiting with the neighbors.
Thank you. The history that I know related to Paradise Estates is that when Will Brown completed Kings Crown Road, which was Paradise Estates number 6, that was in 1985. And there was an agreement that was put in place that he could not sell most of those lots at the end of King's Crown because they were above an elevation that could not be served with water. So he had to develop a plan that was to install the new water tank in order to be able to have water pressure adequate to serve the property that is above Majestic Parkway and the end of King's Crown. Once that plan was in place for the water tank, which came along with this future development of the 200 acres in what was known as the top of Paradise, then he was able to extend Majestic Parkway. So I believe what you were told was that he couldn't develop beyond Majestic Parkway, but you didn't get the full story. That the full story was that he couldn't develop it at that time because he hadn't gotten the water tank designed and installed. But as soon as that happened, all the 200 acres within Majestic Parkway, above Majestic Parkway, and within the top of Paradise, as well as the end of King's Crown Row, was then developable and could be served appropriately with fire flow and water service.
Okay, thank you, Sally. Ben, can you share a little bit about what you saw and what mitigation steps you think can help protect these folks?
Yes, within the last few days, Mr. Ball, myself, Mr. McNabb, Mr. Perry, we've visited the sites, the areas of concern. There are some areas that need some repair, some of these sediment ponds, some of the ditches. Well aware of that, pretty obvious. With regard to the overall drainage plan, that's some reports I need to find. Like I said, a couple days ago, been made aware of this and already got 1 inch thick report I've reviewed, and I need to look at a couple more. The detention pond, I can't speak to if that is the right size. Anything, I really need to dig into those reports more. The ditches along Majestic, that pond, as David had said, needs some maintenance. We need to look at that, possibly repair, but definitely some maintenance getting that silt out of there. But I think we have a good start. We had a couple site meetings, and I think we're all on the same page as where we need to go from here.
Ben, are you referring to the detention pond that is closest to Paradise Circle, or the one at the top of Majestic
At
Parkway?
the top,
Okay.
or with regard to maintenance, the one at the bottom, obviously.
Okay.
But the top one, yeah, I can't speak to if it's has sufficient volume or not. But
I know that it was when it was built in about 2006 or 2007, it was designed for that entire subdivision. What's changed are our design standards. And so when there's a new subdivision that comes in, we can apply those new standards and, if necessary, increase the volume of that pond.
And whose responsibility would that be to increase the volume of the pond? Is it now the city's, or is it the developer?
It's the developer who contributes the flow into that pond.
Okay.
Thanks,
Can I ask a question? About the sediment fences that were shown in a picture, I'm not familiar with this property or anything else. Is that situation still active today with improper sediment or SWIFT implications?
well, those silt fences have, they've extended beyond their useful life, and they're not working anymore. They do need to be.
Whose fences are they? Who's responsible for those?
We're going to let
Here they all
Sally speak to
come
that
running
because
up.
the ownership has changed hands, and so Sally, what can you tell us?
The property that's toward the south and east of the roundabout is in the hands of the former developer Will Brown's daughter and son. So his daughter and son are responsible. I have spoken with Mr. Brown this last week, described the situation that we heard from the neighborhood, and his last comment to me was that I have some work to do.
This has been going on since 2010?
Probably longer than that, to be honest with you. The subdivision, some of the infrastructure was put in 2007, 2008. The fences were installed. I'm not sure when they were installed, but they failed, and we need to get them fixed.
Can I address this issue?
Yes, sir.
I'm Steve Hall. I currently, I live at 1131 Royal Oak Court. Okay? The dirt road, which was used for access over to the properties, I can't remember who was talking, I think it was Sally, that Will was trying to get water to. That road is still dirt, goes all the way around, and it's behind our property. So I was there. Our house had been built like 2 years before the work started. Obviously, he had to take down a lot of trees. And within a short period after that road was cut, we had a significant storm. It brought somewhere between 2 and 3 inches of red sand onto our beautiful meadow. And I mean, it was dirt. It was real dirt before. And so all of a sudden, instead of this nice black soil and stuff growing, we had this ugly red stuff. That was the first part. So I complained to the city, and the city got the fences put in. Now, before I go on, I should say, once those fences were put in, nothing was done to maintain them. So it's been since 2010. All right, the second thing is, I called the city a second time. And this was because of the way the fences were put in. And I don't remember who, but someone from the city came out, and we went up and took a look. And my complaint was, he's taking the water, he's not managing it, he's dumping it on the lot next to me. And that's exactly what happened. So when it rains, the fences do a marginal job anymore. We've had, reasonable growth for the last 2-3 years, but you get this red mess coming down in a river still dumping onto the property next to me, which at the time was vacant but no longer is. All right? So it dumps from there onto his property and ends up in the street. Now, if I dump that much dirt in the street, I know the city would be all over me. You won't allow it from an individual homeowner, but you do allow it with the lack of maintenance or required maintenance on this kind of property, which is in a stage of development. Now, I know that the homeowner next to me is here tonight. Where are you, Jim? You want to talk? Tell them about, come on up. Tell them about your flooding.
Thank you for hearing us this evening. My name is Jim Unruh. I live at 1141 Royal Oak Court. And the first probably 2 or 3 months in the spring of 1915, 2015, sorry. I do, I'm that old now. But anyway, we had a pretty good rain, and what Steve said is right. I had Niagara Falls red running down the mountain beside our house, and it splits and it runs on both sides. I work on this to try to keep this water away from my house. But what needs to be done is the property above me needs to have a dam along that road, because the water runs off that road directly on to our house and to Steve's house. But it needs to be redesigned, and it wouldn't take that much to redesign it, but it needs to be redesigned because all that mud from the top of that mountain comes down, runs down right beside my house, runs by Dan's house, and there's just two, looks like mud fields coming on both sides of our home, down, washed underneath our driveway, collapsed the driveway. I mean, the driveway, I've got underneath there and packed it back up all the time, and I'm redesigning it so the water can't get underneath the driveway anymore. But I mean, it's a mess. It is. And I didn't expect to, when we moved up here, you know, to have to deal with this. And this kind gentleman right here was up there the other day when I was walking my dog, and I showed him some of this stuff. And I'm very happy that the city's looking into this, because I don't want to have $80,000 worth of damage in my basement.
Can I have one little bit?
Thank you very much.
Can I have one little bit?
If you come up, Dan, you can.
Thank you.
So I'm going to not put this thing up because it takes too long. I just want to point out a couple things that Jim is not aware of because of time. But if you look at those two lines to the left and that curve in the road, right above that are two large piles of dirt that when Will was developing, they were temporary places for dirt, and behind that is also a pretty gnarly trailer that's infested with animals and kids playing it. But those two large piles, there's a road that goes up to Kings Crown, up and over. That road had nice vegetation and it had good drainage off of it. But when they put those two large dirt piles there, they've started to erode. And if you now go along that curve, one of the things that the developer did is he built little retention ponds of his own with some green 6-inch pipe, 8-inch pipe. And it's very muddy. The water comes down and fills those, it fills them up. Sometimes they go into, down into Jim's property or down towards behind the Bramlets as well. But it's a real mess. It's a real mess, and those temporary mounds have become, in essence, permanent mounds, and they're big. I mean, they're probably 30 to 40 feet high, very, very steep, and they've now eroded, and they're rivulets. There's not much vegetation that is retaining that, and it continues to erode into these temporary ponds where we now have these green pipes that are breaking and chipping, and It's, I think it's a hazard to wildlife and people. It's just a mess also. So that's all I wanted to add. Yes, sir.
I have a question, please. I would imagine, this is the first time I'm hearing about it. I've been on council going into my second year. I appreciate you guys talking. I'm very sorry for your situation. I wouldn't believe, and I don't believe, I believe that the city is very interested in what's going on. If I get on any legal issues here, stop me. But have you complained to the city about this? And through the years, I would imagine. Is that a true statement, or am I fishing?
It is a true statement. I can only speak for myself.
Dan, could you speak into the
yes,
microphone?
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
It is a true statement, and I can really only talk to myself. We have had, I had conversations, oh my gosh, I started to get really concerned around 2008, and I don't recall who I talked to, but I did have conversations with the owner. One of the things that you should be aware of is to enforce the architectural covenants, we had an architectural committee, and I was one of the first members of the architectural committee. And we were pretty hard to maintain the standards. But we had very little power because the majority of the property was still owned by Will Brown. He actually did a pretty good job at enforcing some of the covenants, such as fences and enclosures. In fact, he took my neighbor across the street to court, and he actually won. But when it came to our general concerns about the property that was developed, for example, if you go on Falcon's Rest, I don't think we have anybody from Falcon's Rest here. I'm sorry?
I live on Falcon's Rest.
Oh, okay. So you're familiar, at the top of the court, there's the road, and there's this drain, and there are these pipes that are vertical. We've had problems there as well as silt coming over onto those roads in the past. As I said, I used to walk since '97 all through those woods, and the lack of vegetation has impacted the runoff. My neighbors with their house, those retention fences are gone. They're ineffective. But I didn't want to add really to that, because that's not what I was trying to say. Is I just wanted to talk about those large mounds of dirt that have impacted the previous drainage from the road that went up and over King's Crown. It's a real problem.
Thanks, Dan.
You betcha.
But also understand that the property that they're talking about is still owned by the developer and is not maintained by the city.
I understand this. Ben, correct me if I'm wrong. We must have an acclimation plan and an erosion plan inside the city. And irregardless of how you look at it, through the years, this situation has allowed to continue and fester and cause erosion and problems to the neighbors down below. I could see the landowner interested in taking somebody to court over a fence and not interested in taking care of the land that he had responsibility of taking care of, and not doing that because that would cost him money. But I can't see the fact that the city would allow complaints to come in and not enforce erosion or establish a plan to stop that erosion and go directly to the owner.
Based on your comment, and Dan,
Please do.
again. I mean, we have an email back from 2010 that was directed to Will Aspich, which used to be he was the Director of Public Works, and it outlines all these issues verbatim that we're talking about. It was dialogue between him and Will Brown and some residents in Majestic. And we'd be happy, I think Doug was going to share that with Ben, because it really outlines some of the problems that they went through and looked at. But that was back in 2010, and it is very detailed on And that has gone down, and it hasn't been attended to. Now you see where we're at now, and what our concern is with new development. Yeah.
Go ahead. Thank you, Mayor. I apologize. At this point, what I can tell you is we'll look at the maintenance issues. We'll look at the erosion control issues. Mr. Unruh, I don't know who you spoke with at the city. I'm sorry you didn't get the response you deserved. Like you, Councilmember Saunier, this is the first I'm hearing of this level of trouble. Dan, I didn't realize your home had been flooded. So we will begin working on this. We have some responsibility to work with the property owner up there. We have the responsibility to enforce those codes. And so please allow us the chance to do that. We do have standards. Clearly they have failed. And so we need to get on that. So Ben will begin working on that tomorrow morning, I'm sure.
And may I say, I appreciate your input and what you just said, and I'm sure the people that are having problems appreciate it too.
Doug Ball again. I moved here about a year and a half ago, and I just moved into my house in Wintergreen Court about 2 months ago. And I got to know the fine neighbors. And it's interesting because it's like Will Brown used to come and talk to everybody all the time, like friend. And I think it's almost like you're not going to turn your friend in if he says he's going to do something for you, but maybe he doesn't do it. So, I mean, it's like a symptom I saw. It's like, well, everybody, you know. So that may explain why there hasn't been a lot of complaints.
Great, thanks very much. We're going to move on with everybody knowing what we've heard. You've heard the responses from the city engineer. Council will certainly be keeping their eye on this. So those that are concerned and they're affected, please don't drop the ball. Keep working with Ben and with our city manager, and just know we're going to do everything we can to remedy that situation. So thank you all. I really appreciate the approach. And we're going to move on to ordinance number 1314 and Mike Farina.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. You have before you the second supplemental appropriation for 2017's budget, and also a public hearing on that. I'll provide a brief summary of this budget revision tonight, and then additional detail is included in the staff report. First, this revision will move and revise the budgeted expenditures and revenues for the Parks and Recreation, Cultural Center, and Aquatic Center operations to a newly created, or to be created, Culture and Recreation Fund. A total of $621,200 budgeted expenditures will be reduced in the general fund and then added to the new fund. The associated revenue is also removed from the general fund and added to the new fund. In addition, a transfer of $312,300 from the general fund to the Cultural and Recreation Fund to cover the difference between the revenue and expenditures in that fund. This part of the revision serves to enhance accountability and transparency of these city services. The next one, because the general fund totally supports the payment of the debt service for the 2015 COPs, which were issued for the Memorial Park, and the 2015 general bonds, which were issued for the construction of the Woodland Aquatic Center, the budgeted expenditure will be moved from the two debt service funds where it was budgeted for in 2017. It'll be moved directly into the general fund. The transfers to the debt service funds and from the general fund are eliminated, and the net effect of this revision is zero. Expenditures for the North Teller Build-A-Generation are moved from the grants fund to the general fund. The transfers from the general fund and to the grants fund are eliminated, and again, the net effect to the budget is zero. The revenue and expenditure in the general fund for the 1.09 city sales tax, which is for the Woodland Park School District, are increased by $124,700 based on year-end projections. Again, net effect to the budget is zero. The general fund budget will increase $15,500 due to greater than anticipated vehicle repair costs. This is more than offset with previously unbudgeted revenues for insurance proceeds for those repairs and also sales of vehicles totaling $17,500. Again, net effect to the budget is zero. The transfer from the general fund to the grant fund will increase by $2,700 to cover an increase in personnel costs arising from the payout of leave balances upon the retirement of the victim advocate coordinator. There are sufficient revenues in excess of what we had budgeted to cover that. Revenue and expenditures will increase $23,000 based on year-end projections for grant-related enforcement overtime, and that will be in the grants fund. Net effect zero. Expenditures in the DDA fund will increase $39,700 based on year-end projections for legal fees. This is mostly offset by increase in revenue projections for the DDA revenue, which was a decrease in the abatements that we had planned for, and then an increase on the payment in lieu of taxes revenue. So with that, I'm here to answer any questions and ask for approval.
Go ahead, Val.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong with anything I say, but we're moving the cultural Parks Recreation Cultural Center, Aquatic Center into the Culture and Recreation Fund. Normally that would impact directly the general fund balance 100, and being that we're really in la-la land, not knowing exactly what we're going to do over there. At the end of the year, we have certain projections for the Aquatic Center, and we're hopeful of all those, of course. But they won't directly impact the general fund, except if we go negative, in which we'd have to do a transfer from the general fund. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
So the vast majority of the things that Mike has talked about are just how he is sculpting how the budget and the funds and the line items are done. Very little effect, zero effect. You heard that on most of those. It's how this artist likes to paint his palette and how he creates the document that he can best work with.
Well, and it'll give all of us a better understanding of what we're doing relative to the pool. So that was one of the reasons why we changed that approach. So that'll be beneficial for all of us. Appreciate that. Any other questions, Carol?
The North Teller Build-A-Generation line items were the title itself was based on a grant called Build-A-Generation. We haven't had that grant money for 2 years.
That's correct.
Should we rename that activity?
The North Teller Build-A-Generation was an offshoot of a program called Communities That Care, and it was a Department of Justice program. And so the vast majority of the money came from the Department of Justice through the Communities That Cares program, but it's been North Teller Build-A-Generation since 1999.
Mm-hmm. I know that the county eliminated that activity because they no longer received the grant money through Communities That Care for that activity.
That's
so
correct.
All I'm suggesting is, should we call it something else?
I don't know that we need to.
That it's no longer Build-A-Generation?
No, it still is. It's just that the county had, I think theirs was called what, Sally? What's the South Belt, Gold Belt, something? Right. Right. They did away with that program, but Lisa Noble still has a job there doing similar things. It's still the Build-A-Generation program.
Okay.
Maybe I'm not understanding your question. I'm sorry.
Okay. I don't think Build-A-Generation as it was once envisioned exists any longer.
Okay. I'll look into it.
Anybody else? Okay, Council, if I can have a motion to consider...
This is a public hearing?
I'm sorry. This is a public hearing. Audience, do we have anybody that would like to comment on either Ordinance 1314 or 1315? Okay, if not, thank you, Mike. Call for a motion to consider 1314.
So, go ahead.
I move approval of ordinance number 1314 as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Suzanne?
Schaefer,
Yes.
Carr,
Yes.
Harvey,
Yes.
Levy,
Yes.
Matthews,
Yes.
Swanier,
Yes.
Sawyer.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Suzanne. Okay, last time to consider ordinance 1315, please.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is to create that special revenue fund that I had talked about on the last public hearing. We're required by charter, or City Council is required by charter to create new funds, and they're giving me authorization to create special revenue funds. So that's what this is. This is the creation of the fund whereby we can transfer those budgeted expenditures and revenues into this new fund. With that, any questions?
Audience? Okay, thank you. Motion to consider ordinance 1315?
Move to approve as stated.
Second.
Thank you. Suzanne?
Carr,
Yes.
Harvey,
Yes.
Levy,
Yes.
Matthews,
Yes.
Swanier,
Yes.
Sawyer,
Yes.
Schaefer.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Mike. Great work. Okay, we'll move on to new business, and Bob Carlson.
Thank you again, Bob Carlson, 1155 Windflower Lane, Woodland Park, Colorado. My request to transfer all Main Street functions from the city to the Main Street Board, including files, electronic files, funds, personnel, everything is associated with Main Street. I submitted that letter at Mr. Buttery's request because we had asked for these things of him. And he says, well, have the board send me that request. So at our last board meeting, the board passed that. And so then as the chairman of the Main Street Board, I forwarded that motion, the decisions that were made by the board, to the city to see if you will then accede to the request. And so it's really into your hands now, I guess.
Council? Discussion? I think the council understands your request. And,
pretty simple.
We appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So is the city then or is the city manager accepting those transfers? Because we'd like to get our files tomorrow and things like that. So, okay.
Council? Objections? What do we need to do?
Did we not provide the appropriate guidance to the city manager?
I think with respect to the files, if the Main Street needs those soon, the city would be able to work with them. That doesn't really present a legal issue so much as just a administrative issue.
We'd be happy to facilitate that. So, Bob, if you would talk to Suzanne,
okay.
We'll see what we can do as much as we can tomorrow.
Okay. But what about the transfer of the funds and the personnel?
And Council, my recommendation is you take that under advisement at this time.
And there you go.
Okay, well, we're stuck in a situation then that I guess the city will continue to pay our Main Street coordinator until the end of the fiscal year, and all the other contracts we have with Gail, for instance, with our IT person that maintains our file. I mean, it's we're hoping to solve the problem tonight, and we're kind of perplexed why it's such a complicated issue. Because what we're trying to do is just take on the responsibility for continuing the Main Street program. So I don't understand what advisement means. Does that mean this is going to be up in the air for the next year or two, or what?
One second, Bob.
And I think what is posing some issues for the city is the notion of a transfer of a coordinator position, and we're just trying to think that through. So there isn't any attempt here not to be responsive to you. You've posed some legal issues, and so those need to be addressed appropriately. And thank you for that. The letter was well written, the legal issues are well framed, and I think the city is moving forward with those.
Okay. So we're hoping to hear back shortly then.
And I would like for you to hear back shortly on this, but until such time as the decision's made, the coordinator will continue to be paid by the city. And so the transfer of the files, the transfer of the emails, the concept of transferring the position, and that's neither here nor there. You have indicated that the board has hired her to be your coordinator.
Right.
So as we move through the process on the balance of the 2017 funds, things will be status quo.
Right.
I'm going to ask Mike to I think Stephanie is your treasurer now. Are you? Okay. For you two to get together to make sure that we have a complete understanding. We think we know what's left, but we'd like to make sure that we know for sure, because sometimes there's a lag in action. And so when we have that information, we'll be able to come to a resolution fairly soon. As far as the city's concerned, you should be able to continue to do what you want to do.
Okay. And so Darlene can continue on her role as a Main Street coordinator.
You've already said that she's doing that.
Okay. Very well then. So things are kind of the status quo until we hear something different. Well, in other words, unless we hear something different,
right?
Everything that we've asked for, basically, we can continue to do. You'll be paying Darlene. We can use her to wrap up the application for being designated city, Main Street community, and that sort of thing.
One of the things that I did ask from you, though, was you say that we need to modify the memorandum of understanding. I asked you to help me understand what needs to be changed. You don't have to tell me tonight,
right?
But I've reviewed the MOU. I'm not sure what needs to be changed. It's quite generic. But if you could provide me something in writing on what you think needs to be changed, we can certainly work through that.
I would agree with you, but there were some others that thought maybe. So I caveated
so
that.
If you'll just have the board send me something that we can work with. So I realize it may not be you making the decision. Have the board put it together, get something to me to see if we need to make any changes or not.
On the MOU. Okay.
Yes, because that's what you've asked us to do.
But I said if necessary.
I understand. So you let me know if it's necessary.
Okay, we will let you know if it's necessary.
Okay.
Great.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to clarify one thing. Main Street has not hired Darlene. It's just a semantics thing.
Well, what term would... He's the board chair, and that's the term he used with me.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure
the board was very careful about that. The board was very careful about that.
Okay.
And we're reaffirming duties, not hiring, not paying, not anything, but duties.
Yeah. And I sent you a subsequent email clarifying what it was meant as employment type of thing.
Okay,
I mean, we didn't have a contract with her or that sort of stuff. So.
Okay.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that acceptable to legal counsel, what you've heard?
It is, and thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to public comment on items not on the agenda. I've got one, maybe two letters that need to be read into the record. Mr. Buttery, my wife and I own a home at the corner of Park Street and Pikes Peak. The drainage here has and is terrible. The present open culvert is outdated and dangerous. We have numerous cars slide into it. It collects puddles of water in low spots, a breeding ground for mold. I've spoken with numerous members of council over the last few years as well as yourself, and Mr. Buttery. Park Street improvements keep getting delayed. I beg of you and council to please budget and get this work finally completed. David, please share this with council at the next public meeting. Thank you, Jim and Tracy Harris. Give me 2 seconds while I find this other one, and here it is. David, instead of hiking on Saturday, we took what I will call the David Buttery walking tour of Woodland Park. We were at a crafts fair at one of the churches on Rampart Range and walked down to the new aquatic center. What a gorgeous facility, and it was teeming with happy children and families. Your vision and persistence made it possible. Then we wandered over to Memorial Park and enjoyed its newly restored beauty and its gorgeous Pikes Peak views. Without your vision and persistence, its restoration would not have been possible. Your imprint is everywhere we turn. What a set of achievements. You are a humble enough man of high character to deflect this praise and point to your team of dedicated city staff. And I have commented in the past how impressed I have been since I've moved here with the city staff. However, every team needs a leader, and we are fortunate as a community that you lead our city and its teams. Your patience and willingness to, quote, take the high road in the face of periodic ad hominem attacks is extraordinary, council meetings, etc., etc. But I suppose your sense of mission is so strong that you are able to shrug off cheap shots at your person and stay focused on policies, programs, and what's best for the city. You have far more fortitude and patience and goodwill than I. Keep up the great work, and thank you very much. And that's from Peter Scanlon. So thank you to both for those letters. And we will move on to mayor's reports. A couple things that happened this week. A number of you attended. First and foremost, I think the veterans events. One at the high school on Friday. Well attended. The place was packed, and just a great ceremony. It's great to see the young kids and the old kids and the young folks and the old folks there, and tons of veterans were there to celebrate. Carol was there. I don't know who else from council, but thank you all for coming, and it was just a tremendous event. Saturday night followed up with the veterans dinner at the Cultural Center. The place was packed. Dan Williams led that effort along with Norm Steen and others, and we've got a great community, no question about that. But when it comes to honoring our veterans, we really step up for that, and so it's much appreciated for me and others that were never veterans, but we wouldn't be here without you. So thanks to all of you. Saturday, November 25th from 9 to 3. That's this Saturday? That's next Saturday. Mountain Artist Holiday Show at the Ute Pass Cultural Center. It's a week from Saturday. 2 weeks from Saturday, December 2nd from 8 to 11. Breakfast with Santa at the Ute Pass Cultural Center. Also that day and the day after, December 2nd and 3rd from 10 to 5, the Tweeds Holiday Home Tour tickets, and those are still available at Tweeds. Also that day, December 2nd from 6 to 8, the Lighter Side of Christmas Parade in downtown Woodland Park, which is always a well-attended event. Sunday, December 3rd, Woodland Park Wind Symphony, the Christmas concert at the Ute Pass Cultural Center, and finally, December 7th, the Chamber Lunch and Learn, testing for mold and mitigation. That's at the Ute Pass Cultural Center. It seems to be appropriate tonight. And that's all I have. Carol?
I have nothing, sir.
Nothing,
Al?
thank you.
Ken?
Nothing really. We hired our final member of the committee for Keep Woodland Park Beautiful, so we've got a full vote, and that's great. And we're planning for 2018.
Thank you. Ball.
I appreciate all the volunteers. I don't know how the city would run without you. I appreciate all the efforts put forth by the citizens who attend the meetings and bring forth information so we can act on it as a group, as we should, in harmony, together, and solve problems. And as the holidays approach, I wish everyone safe travels and keep safe and enjoy your families and the seasons. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Noel?
I have nothing.
John?
Mr. Mayor, at our 2018 work session for the budget 2 evenings ago, I made a statement that I'd like to become part of the record. And Suzanne knows how to do that. I don't, but I want to memorialize my statement.
We will get that taken care of and make that happen.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Aaron? David?
City Clerk's got some things for the council and the audience, and then Sally has a quick thing as well. Suzanne?
As council may recall, the last council meeting, I advised the council of the upcoming election dates, which were regarding candidates and petitions. Tonight, I would like to let the council know regarding the election that the city clerk's office has received 3 proposed initiated measures, 2 of which seek to amend the charter, and one which seeks to amend ordinance number 342, which was passed by the voters, and that is the ordinance that has the 1% sales tax, which has funded the 410 fund. As a result of having received these initiatives, we are now analyzing the state statutes and city charter, and we are looking at the relevant deadlines, and we will keep council apprised of them.
Thank you.
You have someone signed up.
Excuse me, are these the letters we got? I think that's what you're talking about, right? The 2.
No.
And Bob, did you want to come and speak to this?
Yeah, Suzanne
Please
to say something if I wanted
Bob,
to. Yeah. Oh,
you know the procedure.
Yeah, I do. I've done this a few times. Bob Carlson, 1155 Wind Power Lane. Suzanne invited me, if I wanted to comment on these ballot initiatives. 2 of them came out of when I gave my farewell speech when I left council in April 2016, and you've all been advised of those. One was to transfer the 1% sales tax for the streets into the general fund, and that would allow us to be able to use that money without fences. I know the city's been concerned that we wouldn't be funding street projects so much, but that's up. Hopefully the council will still maintain that as a priority. So you've seen that those 2 proposals. We also added a 3rd one, and we have Murph here. It's leading the effort on that one, and I'm helping him because I've been doing these other the formatting and everything of the other 2. So that one has to do with having a strong mayor, city council strong mayor form of government, as opposed to city council city manager form of government. And this is based on the principle that executives should be directly accountable to the citizens. And this is how it had been for centuries, until the early 1900s, when you had Tammany Hall and other abuses of that city strong mayor form of government. And so that was a result of the progressive movements back in the early 20th century. Now we've talked to the I've talked to the city clerk in Colorado Springs, who went to a strong mayor back in 2010. and they've explained what their problems were with that and how that was organized, which we also are trying to take into account and resolve. We talked to the city clerk in Pueblo, who last Tuesday approved strong mayor ballot question, and they now will be a strong mayor city. So we've also gotten advice from the City Council's Strong Mayor Institute in San Diego, California, as far as what other experiences, what other trends are, and that sort of thing. So the mayor, the city clerk, and the city attorney are looking at those. On the last one, it should be pretty straightforward since we used all the format that Pueblo used. So we're hoping that that will go through pretty quickly. So that in essence is the three that would be coming before this body, the council, probably, hopefully, by the 7th of December, your next meeting. I've already received advice from the city attorney as to what needs to be changed, change a verb here or there, that type of thing. So we can easily make those changes to make it acceptable to the city attorney. So anyway, this is just a heads up from Suzanne. She wanted to alert you so you weren't taken by surprise. So thank you for this opportunity to clarify what that's happening.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Bob. Murph, you want to speak to that also, or? Is there anything you can add to that? Okay, I'm sorry, I was just giving you an opportunity. Okay.
Mayor and Council, I would like to just add to Suzanne's presentation and to what Mr. Carlson said, and that is one of the proposed initiatives that seeks to amend the charter that Mr. Carlson is working on is one that includes a detailed series set of procedures that the council would use if they were to plan their capital investment planning along the lines that is being recommended by Mr. Carlson. The one thing I would point out to council is that council always has the ability, our charter requires that any matter that gets put on the ballot is a legislative matter, and my analysis is that the proposed ordinance with the detailed capital investment planning procedures is not legislative, it's administrative. As a result of that, the council could, if they were so inclined, always decide to adopt guidance, adopt resolutions, something short of a charter amendment that would contain some capital investment planning provisions that would dovetail with the current charter's provisions. And if council were to do something like that, that might have some effect on the petitioning process that Mr. Carlson might undertake. So it's just something that I would mention to council, something that council could think about on their own. Again, because a matter that is administrative is not a proper ballot matter, but council could act and do something along those lines if they were so inclined.
And for clarification, a ballot initiative, asking the council to sponsor a ballot initiative, if we choose not to do that, what would then be the petitioner's next step if they still wanted to get it on the ballot? Well, with respect to charter amendments, those don't have an opportunity like a initiative that's not a charter amendment. An initiative that's not a charter amendment goes through a petition process. The required number of signatures are garnered, and then the process in our charter requires that the ordinance come to the council first, and the council could consider passing the ordinance in the exact form that that was contained in the petition. And if they don't,
then it goes automatically as an initiated ordinance onto the ballot. It's different for charter amendments. Charter amendments simply, there isn't that chance for intervention from council. The petitioners for the charter amendment move it forward if they get the requisite number of signatures.
And that's really what I was referring to. We do not have to approve it or endorse it or pass it on. It can be placed on the ballot by a petition initiative.
Exactly. There is no real action there's no action other than to order that a publication happen on the part of council.
Thank you.
Anybody else, Paul?
I'd just like to ask one thing. We have in our charter for council amendments, and they clearly speak to the council may adopt a budget with or without amending the budget, and the council may add or increase any program or amount. So this is what we're talking about, correct, in our charter that you've just...
Yes, you have I think it's 9.5, you have a provision for...
yeah, and it's 9.8. And I'm just educating myself, and I've seen this come about, and so I've been reading the charter, and I want to make sure I understand council's obligations and their ability to work with the city in budget. That's all.
Right, and I was actually, and you are correct, Councilman Saunier, that is those are the council amendments. I was referring to the capital program provisions of the charter, and that's 9.5.
I have the capital program here too.
1 minute, Bob. Now come right on up. You have 1 minute.
Okay. Yes. 9.5 is what I was trying to be a little bit more specific about, because pretty much the city has kind of ignored 9.5. If you read that charter, what the city has not done is there is no accompanying message providing the context of the capital program. There is vague descriptions of the locations of the capital projects in a footnote in one line item which covers all the total cost of all those projects. The projects are not individually listed as in previous years with a name, location, and based on, quote, detailed cost estimates by the departments and other divisions of the city government, unquote. There is no, quote, list of all capital improvements which are proposed to be undertaken during the following years with appropriate supporting information as to the necessity for the improvements, unquote. There is no individual project, quote, cost estimates, proposed methods of financing, and recommended schedules for each such improvements, unquote. There is no, quote, estimated annual cost of operating and maintaining the facilities to be constructed or acquired, unquote. If you look, pretty much everything that is in Section 5 isn't being followed. And so what I was looking for is that, yes, all of this could be covered by a resolution by council, that you look into this to make sure that we're up to date on how do we plan, program, and budget capital projects. And we have some engineers who build stuff in here, and you know how important it is to have a process for doing that. Now, when council discusses this, they can cut out a bunch of steps if you want, but I just wanted this to brought to attention because I just listed all the things that are in that charter section that aren't being done. Okay? So I leave it to you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we have Sally for something?
We do. Very quickly, the Coalition of the Upper South Platte is asking that we relook the Community Wildfire Protection Plan.
Yes.
Please.
Thank you. Next meeting on December 7th, the Coalition for the Upper South Platte, CUSP, will be here to do a presentation on their updated community wildfire prevention plan. So I would like to hand these out to you tonight. give you the next few weeks to be able to peruse it, and then Carol Aquarius will be here to do a presentation and bring you up to speed on how much fire mitigation has been accomplished and where we would like to go next for those hot spots within the greater Woodland Park area.
I'm sorry, Sally, refresh my memory. Is it December 7th?
7th.
Okay.
December 7th
Next council
meeting.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Because the press is here, and because, once again, I've been accused of violating the charter, I feel like I need to set the record straight, or from my opinion. Mr. Carlson has his opinion. He's expressed it for years. We've had budgets that have been reviewed by our council and by our auditors. We're not in violation of the charter. We've told you that we're going to have a more improved 5-year capital plan where we're going to consolidate everything. We've committed that to you. We're not in violation of the charter.
Thank you.
I agree with you. I don't think so, and we have discussed it, and it's in the open, and I have no problem.
Thank you, sir. Council, anything else before we adjourn? Thank you all for being here.